Hello, people of the internet installed with at least 2 different auditory organs on either side of your cranium. I am HamsterBomb.
I guess that's true. And I'm Timothy.
And this is HITBOX, the gaming podcast where we talk about people's ears, I guess. Because you have ears. That's the way I guess you're digesting this information.
To relate that in, I mean, the whole PS5 does the weird sound thing, supposedly.
Yeah, that's recent news. We never make recent news jokes on HITBOX because it takes like 2 weeks for these episodes to go up at fastest.
Recent. The PS5's been out for a year now.
I know, but just recently they made an update to make the beep stop. We don't even have a PS5. Anyway, we're not going to talk about that today. Instead, we're going to do another one of these round 2 episodes where we do a deep dive into one of the games I have already reviewed on Playing With Myself. Typically when I make those reviews, and especially for this game, I never get a chance to talk about everything that I wanted to talk about with the game.
No.
And usually I'm the one who's, clamoring for making a round 2 on one of them, but this time it was Kim. Kim really wanted to talk some more about Witcher 3: The Wild Hunt.
I mean, that's probably just because it's my favorite game ever.
Is it?
It is.
Yeah, this is new news for me.
It is not. It is always my number 1 on my list.
Really? Normally
Witcher
you're
3.
saying Final Fantasy X or 7,
No.
Xenosaga 1 or 3.
No, it's Witcher 3. That's always my favorite. Mostly because I
Huh.
can do whatever I want to do in that game.
Yeah, and it's something that you say that, and a lot of people assume like, oh, I've played games that make that claim, but it's nothing like Witcher 3. I've never seen anything else that was even remotely like...
Whatever you
actually
want to.
get,
I don't know.
free reign of your decisions. I even made this complaint when I was talking about Persona 5, which is another game that you really love.
I do like that game.
A lot of the decisions in that game you have are non-decisions. The exact same thing will play out no matter what. If anything, at least Atlas in that case is going through the effort of making a different voiced option where this person answers your other question first and then just basically says the other one, and they have to record 2 different voice lines for it. That's not what Witcher 3 does.
Which was one of the wonderful things about us playing Witcher 3 simultaneously, is that we found out in so many scenarios we chose like opposite answers. We went totally different directions.
And you can even play, in the DLC for Blood and Wine especially, 2 completely different games. Mm-hmm. It's almost as extreme as what Witcher 2 was, which is probably a good point to mention what we've played. I've clearly played Witcher 1, 2, and 3 because I reviewed all 3 of them. We wanted to do a deep dive of 3. I think 3 needs the most attention of them. Clearly, it's the big one, even though it is not the most recent Witcher game. There's a ton of Witcher games, and there's a ton of Witcher media. Before you even get into that, I know you want to. Just very briefly, you guys would have seen I did play all of Witcher 3 Wild Hunt for the first time on, not live streams. They were like hour-long episodes on YouTube.
What, just like Let's Plays?
Mm-hmm. Yep, super long episodes, shameless plug. But after that, I went back and played the whole thing again on PS4. On Death March difficulty with a quest tracking app, so I would make sure that I played absolutely every quest in the entire game, even requiring making alternate saves so I can make huge other decisions that would result in brand new quests you otherwise would have never seen.
Yeah, I'm glad you answered that, because I was about to say some things get locked off if you make certain decisions, so you can't always do that.
You do have to make either a New Game Plus or alternate saves in order to actually see every quest.
So that works well on like the PlayStation systems, because then you'll at least get trophies proving that you've done one of the quests.
Except if you are playing Death March and then you're really figuring out why it's better on PC, because gosh darn it, the penalty to dying in the hardest difficulty Death March is the fact that the loading on the PS4 is atrocious.
Okay, well, we have like a first generation PS4, so that might have something to do with it.
Yeah, it's not a PS4 Pro, but who cares? It's still... that was the problem. It would take me more time to load than it would be for me to die the next time. It's some occasions. Anyway, so that was just my iteration with it. I think, Kim, you played through 1.5 times? Is that right?
Yeah, 1.5. I wouldn't even say 1.5. I was actually thinking about this the other day, because it's like I just got to Novigrad.
Oh, that's not even close to half.
That's like maybe a quarter.
Maybe. Well, if you count all the DLC, yeah, maybe a quarter.
Maybe.
Yeah. But you did play the whole shebang on PC.
I did.
I remember she would stay up very late on my computer. I would come home late from work a few years ago and find Kim is up at like 11 at night, still playing Witcher 3 on my computer.
Which is not like me. I go to bed at like 9.
And she started like when I left. yeah, this.
Why live here when I can live in Witcher 3? Okay,
Yeah,
we also didn't have a child at that time, so that's another factor.
Yeah, this is not something that can happen anymore. Okay, but it's just to be clear about that. So another thing I had to quash earlier before you got into it.
Okay.
Witcher is enormous, and it's not just these games, even though we're talking about 3, and I've reviewed 1 and 2. Not only just video games, we also have Thronebreaker. We haven't gotten a chance to play that just yet. We've played Monster Slayer while it existed.
I'm going to talk about all of them. I gotta go over... just because we were talking about the third game, I felt it necessary to do a brief history. A brief history.
Sure, we'll try. Because I can't fit something I can't fit into a Playing with Mice episode. Even though sometimes I try to do that. I try and have history of stuff if it's
what I found out is that we didn't even get a lot of stuff translated over to America. So, like, Witcher's so much older in Poland than it is in the U.S. and other countries.
Right.
So,
the first we ever saw of it, I believe, was Witcher 1, the video game. By CD Projekt Red.
Yep, that's the first thing I got translated.
And Poland, old news for them by that point.
Yeah, at that point.
How many novels did they have by that point?
Okay, well, so we'll start it out. The Witcher by, I'm going to say it wrong, Andrzej Sapkowski?
I'm not even looking at it right now, and I think it's Andrzej Sapkowski. There's like a I don't know if you pronounce that or not. I'm not Polish.
You'll have to apologize. We do not know Polish.
No, in an earlier HITBOX episode, I even very embarrassingly mixed up his name with Alexei Pajitnov as the creator of Tetris.
That's not even the same country.
I know. The weird silent J's throw me sometimes, and I just feel like... Anyway.
The original Witcher was originally a short story that appeared in 1990. So,
oh my gosh.
And it was only in a magazine, and
33
it was
years.
Never published in English. So...
So never, as in still not.
So, yes, it's never been published in English. The original
probably
short
officially.
Story
There's got to be a fan translation somewhere.
Let me try to pronounce it. Wiseman.
I'll give you that.
The
I'm
Witcher,
not even
I don't know. So that's just kind of going over the novel series. That's where it started. We've got 9 installments of the novel series, and that was started publication in English in 2015.
Right, and as far as I'm aware, there's 2 pre-novel books that he made that are like short stories. I think you're actually working through the second of them, or maybe you're farther.
No, I'm over in the other. I'm actually in like the main group of books now.
Okay,
so.
There should be, from my understanding, there should be 7 volumes of that, but there's extra ones afterward. But the main story ends in Lady of the Lake, which is actually the one that I'm reading right now. So I've read the first 2 that predate the whole novel series, and then all of them up to that point.
Right.
And one thing, just to tie into the game very quickly while we're talking about the books, there's been this thing where people are claiming, the games are non-canon to the books. To which...
No, Andrzej Sapkowski says they are non-canon.
Right, I wanted to make sure that is clearly what we're saying here, because CD Projekt Red, and just coming from someone who's read all but I'm almost done with the last one, everything in it can totally be canon in the video games. There's no reason why they can't be, other than Andrzej Sapkowski is not getting royalties from the video games, so therefore, of course, they're not canon if it's up to him.
We're gonna butcher that name this whole entire HITBOX.
Okay, fine. What do you want to call him then?
Sapkowski sounds easier to say than Andrzej.
Mr. Sap.
Grumpy old man.
I don't know his personality. I've not spoken to the man.
That's true. Okay.
He could be a very pleasant individual.
So that was supposed to just be a brief conversation. Moving on.
I'm sorry.
So it's funny because we didn't even get the volumes of the novel until 2015.
That's why the numbering, I think, is a little screwy.
The first Witcher game in 2007. So that's like really messes up.
Yeah, so as far as we're concerned over in the West, it's a video game.
It's a video game first, right.
Yeah, so he's allowed in Smash Brothers.
And then
as if the rules mattered.
We get Assassins of Kings in 2011.
Great game.
So that's the second one. And then we get, the one we're talking about today, The Wild Hunt, in 2015.
Which we should also mention, Kim has not played 1 or 2.
I have not, but 2 is on my list. 1, I'm waiting for this remake that's about to come out. Because...
I feel one of these days I'm going to make you sit down and play some of Witcher 1.
Oh my gosh, Zoltan scares me in Witcher 1
I don't think
so
you'd get
much.
that far.
He's terrifying. You've seen him? His eyes are popping out of his head.
Yeah, the models in that. Oof. We'll save that for a round 2 on Witcher 1.
It really seems like that Witcher 3... really got it headstrong here in the U.S. because that's also when we started finally getting the English translations of the novels. Was after
it came at a good
out.
time for video games as well. This is a time I think people were a little more turned off of things like Fable, what they were expecting to be a game like Witcher. Like people, a dark fantasy where your choices matter in a video game is very appealing in the West. And we've gotten, of course, Witcher 1 and 2, but they were never close to the open world massive scape of what 3 is.
Right, so I just want to say that Witcher 1 is only on PC, Witcher 2 is only Xbox or PC, Witcher 3 is finally on everything.
Yeah, even the Switch. I don't understand how that one happened. But funnily enough, there is actually save data information that can move over from Witcher 2 if you played it PC to Witcher 3 on PC. It's the only way this can happen. But it would actually...
We'll talk about that, I think, a little bit more when we get to, like, story parts, because I think that's really important story point in 3. So I think we can come back to that later.
Yeah, honoring the canon of what happened in your version of 2.
Exactly. So we'll talk about that a little bit later, I think, when we get to, like, gameplay and story.
Yeah, because that's another thing I know we haven't really mentioned it again, just in case this is your first round, too. We try and go generally in the same order of everything that I say in playing with myself, just because it's, like, a habitual thing to go in order. We hit the main points.
I was just this time really encouraging doing a quick history check because there's so much media for it that we don't even know about in the West.
Yeah, Kim was researching, finding like all sorts of plays.
Yeah,
and
so
stuff
all
like
the
that.
other spin-offs that are out there. There's a Witcher adventure game, like a D&D almost like thing.
Is it just text-based or is it like?
I think they have like a little board with it, from my understanding.
Oh, that's fun.
And it's with the characters of The Witcher, so you get like Triss and Geralt and everything.
Cool.
So it was kind of hard to find information on that. I'm not sure if CD Projekt Red is printing it anymore.
Well, if anything, they'd probably be moving people over to the new actual board game that they have that just came out. Technically, last year, but the Kickstarter was actually sent out this year.
That's like one of the last things on my list. There's also The Witcher Battle Arena. I didn't really know what that was.
Sure.
I think it's another like game. There's the Gwent card game online. There's Thronebreaker, the Witcher Tales that we had talked about, which I'm pretty sure has like nothing to do with Geralt at all.
I think he appears in it briefly, but I wouldn't know. I haven't played it yet.
There's the Monster Slayer, so it's really sad.
There was the Monster Slayer.
That really sad mobile game that happened.
It was a lot of fun.
I loved that game when it first came out.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun.
That was actually a really fun game, and it just got quashed because of money, I would assume.
Yeah.
Yeah, bad updates.
I enjoy this because I haven't played Cyberpunk, but apparently Roach has a mini game in it.
That's great.
Like a racing horse mini game.
Okay.
There's the Netflix series, of course.
Oh, yeah.
And then there's the animated film that the Netflix... It just all retcons the games and the books.
Oh, yeah.
Anything
the
that
Netflix
happens
show
on
is
Netflix.
a disaster.
Well, there's that animated film also on Netflix. So, like, that's the same thing.
Did we watch that?
No, we didn't.
No? Okay, so
because
we
were
will
so
have...
scared.
Yeah. Well, because we saw the Netflix live-action adaptation, and we were very disappointed. So, we will have an adaptation of video games into other media episode of Hitbox coming later. So, that's why we're going to try and gloss over this, like... Next thing.
There's also an original other Polish TV show of The Witcher, which Sapolsky has actually been quoted as hating.
Yeah.
He hates it. So that was like in the 90s, early 2000s, I think.
So if that was the standard that Netflix was going from, maybe it's great by comparison.
I don't know. It was
I don't
never
know.
translated in English. There's the comic book, which I've been interested in picking up.
It's cool. What do you mean picking up? I have a graphic novel.
Oh, you did get one of them? I can't
it's
remember.
right there. You want to look at it right there on my shelf? It's
Oh,
really good.
I see it.
Off screen, I'm physically pointing.
We didn't even grab all of our media and
well, what does it matter? This is for the auditory listeners, for people who may or may not have two ears.
Okay, so I was mixing it up. So the adventure game's more like a board game, and then there is a tabletop RPG, which is just...
Yeah, I heard about that one. That's what I was
not translated.
confused about. Right. Nope.
Then we have The Witcher Old World, which we just got from...
Yeah.
That's what he was talking about from Kickstarter.
It was a huge Kickstarter event, for their board games.
That was a lot of money. But it's really cool, and it's fun. It's fun.
Yeah, it's really cool. If anything, at the very least, the reason we wanted to get into it was because, hey, look, these are really detailed little miniatures for... That's how board games always get you. Little miniatures for these things from this video game. Oh, I remember that monster. I really love that. Oh, you mean I can play a little game with quests and everything? And
yeah.
Man, we can be playing that game for years. The stack of quests in there, just the decks are so unwieldy huge. It's unbelievable.
Right.
So a lot of content in that. It just sounds like a board game, but it's like a whole full-blown
It's a lot. We really
shebang.
Encourage it. I've heard you can pick it up at local game stores.
Yeah, now you can.
So that's great. They got more of them printed and published out there. And the last things I want to mention, apparently there is a rock opera.
Oh, yeah.
Of The Witcher and a musical version, and those are only in Polish.
When you said that, for some reason, my first thought was a pet rock, and I was thinking like a rock with like this white hair and like a little medallion hanging under it. Like, huh? I think I would like that.
Pet rock Geralt.
Pet rock Geralt.
So that's all of the media that's out there, and as you can tell, there's a lot of it we've never even got translated to English.
Right, but I guess what she's trying to get at here is it's a huge franchise, and it's not just 3 games, even though we're talking about Witcher 3, and that's kind of sort of the newest one. CD Projekt has announced, and I think they have a problem with this, they've announced 2 other games that they are working on in the Witcher series, the big ones. They're doing a full-blown remake of Witcher 1, which I think is actually a really great idea.
I just found it funny, like a few days before they announced that remake of Witcher 1, you would ask me what game would you like somebody to remake from the ground up, and I literally said...
Wish came true.
Witcher 1.
Yeah, because I don't want to get too much into Witcher 1, but it is janky. I have a full review of that if you want to. The story is outstanding.
Looks amazing.
Yeah,
I'm gonna play it.
The main story of Witcher 1 might be better than 3.
Yeah.
Now, 3 has way more content in it, but the base story of what happens in 1 is really great. And the other game is they didn't call it officially Witcher 4, but it's basically Witcher 4.
I mean, I absolutely love the story and everything of 3, but people refer to it sometimes as like Finding Nemo.
What?
I just felt the need to mention that.
I've never heard that before. That would basically be what the books are, too. Yeah. Which is actually kind of a weird thing to mention. So the books are effectively the same kind of story of Witcher 3, where Geralt is on this enormous quest, traveling across the continent while doing other things that he has to do, and dealing with ongoing wars, and try to find Ciri, which is verbatim the books. But that is not what happens at all in 1 or 2. They're like totally different things that just happen to be in the same universe, which I found really weird. Now that I've because I played them in reverse order. I played 3, 2, 1, and then read the books. So
which is fine, by the way.
Oh, yeah, you can go completely out of order.
Nothing wrong with that.
But since I did that, now I'm finding how strange it is that at the 2 extreme ends of this timeline that totally can be canon, by the way, the same thing happens twice. It's kind of weird.
Well, that's just because you can't keep that girl in one place.
Well, no, and she can kind of jump through time and space. It's her thing. So you try and chase that down. And she's also extremely stubborn.
Yes.
So that's never going to happen.
Oh, I love her.
Yeah, she's trained by witches, too. Anyway, so what was the first segment? First impressions? Did we actually get a chance to do that?
First impressions, yeah. Okay, so I'm trying to organize it like we went through our history and everything.
Yeah,
that's
right.
All
which was
the media.
Also not needed, but there we have it.
Well, I just felt like if you're jumping onto it for the first time, you know nothing about Witcher, and you were like, well, I want to play 3, but I don't know what else is out there.
If anything, I'd say, like, somebody, I feel intimidated by Witcher. Should I jump into it? Well, this person just spent the first 18 minutes talking about the history before I actually get into the game, so probably not.
This is not Kingdom Hearts. It's okay.
It's fine.
Play Witcher 3.
You can literally jump in anywhere, and it's fine.
Yeah, so
you could probably even jump into halfway through someone's save file of Witcher 3, and it would be fine. It wouldn't matter.
So the first thing I've written are first impressions. Mm-hmm. So, what you got?
I love at first sight. I thought it was amazing. I don't know what to tell you. I remember discovering this. Well, actually, I remember first the game winning Game of the Year. And I was really shocked by it. I think it was up against like Metal Gear Solid 5 and a few other really big things. And I knew of them, and I just offhandedly knew about The Witcher. And everyone that I knew, my friends who were watching at the time, back when that was a thing, they were all like, "Oh my gosh, Witcher 1," and they were all saying, "Oh, I got to buy this now." And of course, CD Projekt Red's developers come up on stage and say, "Since we just won, we are now putting the game on this % off deal right now on all platforms."
Oh my gosh.
Because of course they do that. You could walk up there and say, we're increasing the price because we just won Game of the Year. But of course not. CD Projekt Red is just like, And this has become one of the highest grossing video games ever, too. It's one of the top selling video games ever made.
People are still going out and buying it just because of these great prices that
you can get it for
CD
so
Projekt
cheap.
Red puts it on.
I got it for super cheap,
I think it was
too.
like $7.
Yes, I paid like almost nothing for this for like a
And then we
Halloween
bought it
sale
again.
years ago. Oh yeah, and then I bought it again. And of course all the DLC, which
we also got it on a crazy sale too.
Yeah,
it was only like at $2.
And you can get Witcher 1 for like $1
Yeah.
too, like at all times too. So it's a very cheap franchise to get into. And then once you get into it and realize, wow, this was like the greatest video game investment I've ever made in my life. Yeah, that about sums up my first impression. I was kind of stuck into it.
Yeah.
Maybe not as glued as you were to my computer. I couldn't have my computer
It was
back.
everything I had wanted in a video game for so long.
And I remember trying to convince you to let me buy this game. Because I
was
had
a new IP. I was hesitant.
Well,
I'm
new for
like
you,
that.
right? And I had to find a bunch of trailers for the game. Which, by the way, to this day, I still can't tell if they did this with real actors and like really great CG, or if it was actually just like all done on the computer. Because their trailers are
trailers.
I've never seen trailers look so good.
Yeah.
And still fit like what the game is.
So yeah, like you were saying, my first impressions, I was clearly stuck in the game, and
Well,
honestly, super annoyed that I didn't get into this franchise sooner. So mad. Really, what caught my eye is you started seeing those like 12-inch statues at like GameStop. And I was just like, oh, this game looks so cool. What is it? I don't know what this is.
Those are usually just characters, too. And I feel like the highlight... Well, I mean, the characters were all fantastic in The Witcher, but the thing that really gets you into it is more of the monsters and the mythology of, like, the creatures that are being reinterpreted into this weird, twisted, Polish, like, nightmare world that they just kind of have to deal with.
I remember when I was first trying to play it, and I got really sucked into it. I remember thinking White Orchard, which I thought was the whole game at one point.
The place is so big.
I thought it was the whole game. It was so large.
I remember coming in to tell you, like, so did you get out of the tutorial area yet? What do you mean tutorial area? No, White Orchard. What?
I thought that was the whole game. I had no idea.
I know.
We paid such a small fee for it.
Yeah.
And then I'm thinking... I've done so much already in White Orchard. I've leveled up my armor like twice. I've done all the extra
I beat the final boss. I beat the Griffin. I fought all this other side stuff like this Noon Wraith. Man, that was probably the first quest where I was like, this series is something special I've been missing out on. And it was that first Noon Wraith quest where you have to find out what happened by reading journals and like diving into a well.
Yeah.
I
don't know. Is that White Orchard?
Yeah, that's in White Orchard. It's probably gonna be your first quest in the game if you're like walking straight through the village. Because the first thing that you do outside of like the story stuff is you'll probably walk forward and find this bulletin board, which you'll find in almost any town in the game, giving you extra quests. And literally right next to it, and I think it's the only contract on there, it's the first one, it takes you right over to this house next door.
Also, one of the things that made me think White Orchard was like the beginning place is like your goal from the beginning is to find Yennefer, and I was like, oh, that must just be the whole game. So you find Yennefer, and I'm like, okay, game's over.
Bro, Yennefer finds you.
Right.
She's a sorceress. She just finds you. And that cutscene kind of eventually takes you into the heart of the real meat of the game, which is into the larger lands of Velen.
Right.
Which, if you look at like an actual map of the entire Witcher continent, which actually is kind of easy if you want to look at, for example, like the board game, because that's actually what the board game's map is. It's the entire continent.
Right.
Velen, this enormous, and we said that White Orchard was huge. White Orchard is a pinprick on the continent. The actual area of Velen, which is gargantuan in The Witcher 3, it's so tiny on the actual board
it's very
compared to the actual whole of the continent itself. And then you go to Skellige.
Right.
And then you go to Tucson.
Well, we'll talk all about that when we get to our story part.
Sure.
Because like that's all about where you're going, what's going on. I was just stating like White Orchard, I thought that was the whole game. That's how big it is.
Yeah, and some people are intimidated by the size of it. It's also one of those games where you can easily blast through it. It's got, I guess we can just forward into the gameplay segment now. It's got this really great thing I don't think I got to talk about, where it will scale the XP and rewards from your quests based on your level. Mm-hmm. So if you just do main story stuff and you just completely ignore the other quests in the game, I believe the game will still scale you accordingly to what you have to be doing next.
You do not have to go, oh, look, what's that, and walk over to it. You can just follow the main story.
Your ADD is going to do that for you. You will just do it anyway, but you don't have to.
But you don't have to.
And then if you ignore it and you come back later, say you're level 30 and it's a level 7 quest, you will still... it'll probably be a lot easier.
Yeah, it will
But you will get, 1 XP and probably less gold. I don't know if you get less gold.
I think so.
But you will definitely get less XP for doing it later. And I think you get more XP for doing something you're under-leveled for. Because there's a lot of instances where you're really excited about a story of something and you want to push through even though you are not prepared for it and you think you can do it anyway. I did this way too much because I wanted certain rewards on my Death March run.
All the time.
Yeah, and then you can get certain smithies unlocked or certain towns. There's all sorts of reasons why you would want to do stuff underleveled aside from a huge boost of XP.
Yeah, so that's kind of leads into what I wanted to talk about. My number one first thing with gameplay is talking about contracts. Because they're a large portion of your game. Mm-hmm. I mean, but then there's also, quests that you just run into people. Because the world's always active and doing something.
That might be the most interesting thing about it. The game is coded that at any point it's got so many little checkboxes. So say you're just walking through some town in the middle of nowhere. And the game is looking through checkboxes like, is it nighttime? Have you done this main story thing yet? Have you beaten this other side quest to trigger this other person to do this thing? And then you might pass by somebody who you recognize from another quest who happens to be going there at that moment. And it'll make all sorts of organic things like this happen in the game. And this would never work unless the game had so many things for you to do that you're effectively living your life here and just bumping into someone casually feels natural. And you as a player have absolutely no idea how they programmed that into a video game. I still don't know how these wizards did it.
One of the most amazing things about contracts, and I think because, you were saying, walking into people and anything can happen at any time, I'd never thought I'd get to be a detective in a dark fantasy world.
Yeah.
But that's kind of what you are. I feel like a lot of the times with these contracts.
In most of them, yeah. You're kind of like a superhuman detective. Geralt has his Witcher senses, which are luckily a dumbed-down version of the overpowered Batman sensor thing. Detective mode. Ever since I've seen that in the Arkham game, I've seen so many other games do it, and it's so helpful. People tend to play their games with that on. But instead...
That's me in Ghostwire right now. I'm constantly using that mode.
Yeah, they turn that detective thing on. And in Witcher, I believe you can't even run while you're doing it. You're kind of focusing.
No, you can walk slowly.
You can walk. Yeah, you can walk. But... So you could basically follow footprints or follow smells. Take advantage of your heightened senses as a Witcher to try and...
You can also hear things.
You can hear very far away and isolate certain sounds. Figure out... which birds in a forest are the unnatural ones, and figure out maybe where are the points that might take you to a Leshen totem.
A lot of crows or something in this forest, or a lot of wolves, and you're like, I gotta be on the lookout.
Right, or you're trying to chase down somebody who may have ran across a river, so the footprints go away, and now you gotta figure out where did they actually go, and there's all sorts of reasons why you would need to hunt someone down or figure something out. But I think some of my favorite steps between there happen in books. So you'll also find, like I mentioned with the Noonwraith thing,
You're talking about books in the game.
Yes, books in the game, which are usually just short little snippets that you can read.
I got really sad, so I kind of stopped reading them as much.
Oh, there's so many sad ones.
Sad.
Even the one with the Noonwraith is extremely sad.
Oh, that one's very depressing.
It's very sad. I think it ended up with that man's wife hanging herself in the well or something like that, or throwing herself in.
Yeah, she threw herself in the well after he had gotten pulled out and murdered by another group, and...
There's so many of these little stories that...
Monsters are created from the monsters within us.
Well, that's actually what's happening. Yeah. We can probably get into the story of that later, but still. So if you could just go over there and gameplay-wise try and solve this, you probably won't get very far unless you actually read the notes, which give you a hint that there's something in the well. And this is another big surprise in a video game. You would think normally if I jump in a well in a video game, I'm going to die.
Yes.
Right? So this is already teaching you can go anywhere. If you think you can do it, you can do it. Except your fall damage is a little intense. But you can do it. You'll be fine.
You do get fall damage in this game. I do want to point out, because this should have been part of my first impressions, I died in the tutorial. I died in a dream in the tutorial. This isn't just White Orchard.
The tutorial of the very beginning of the game is a dream sequence.
The very first scene, yes.
And Kim died in this by not knowing what the buttons did. I think you jumped off.
I jumped off of the balcony.
From, what is that, Kaer Morhen?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
That was totally...
But still, anyway, you find these, you would find these books, and you would read through them, and that's how you'll get the clues. Sometimes your actual quest will update and tell you, like, a new point and a marker of where you need to go.
Right, it'll add, like, multiple markers so you can make those decisions. So luckily, you don't have to go back and keep reading it.
But you shouldn't skip them, because you might discover, like, the person who gave you the quest was lying.
Yeah.
And it was making you do this to cover something up. And there's all sorts of deceptions going on in this game. You're right, the villains are actually the humans. Monsters are just there. Or created by humans.
Sometimes the monsters are pretty bad.
Sometimes the monsters are pretty bad. But the humans are more despicable. There's a reason Geralt has 2 swords on his back, one for monsters and one for humans. So you would actually need to pay attention and read those things. Just because you don't want to waste your
silver sword on a human, you can just kill that with steel.
Well, it doesn't do as much damage. But also, you would go back to it, that person who was lying to you later, and now you have multiple options of what you can tell this person.
Like, deceive them, say you did it, go ahead and fight them.
Or if you did do it and you found out after the fact, and
they might pay you more to keep hush-hush.
That kind of thing happens. And the game will actually split every time there's a huge choice like this, and it will honor that split throughout the end of this quest. And there might be, like, 15 different, like, combinations of solutions that get you to the end of this quest, and they're all like this.
And one of those things, I love that about the quest, that they can go in so many different directions, and there's so many out there. But I also like that it's not just like Monster Hunter, where you accept a quest and now the monster's just there in the wild.
It just appears.
This is a living world. These monsters that you get contracts for are always
They're
out
always there.
You can run
accidentally,
into them.
I've done that before. I've accidentally run across, like, a huge foglet.
Yeah.
Started fighting me in the middle of, like, the dense woods at night. And I was like, oh my god! And just desperately trying to kill this thing. And luckily, because Geralt just carves off trophies of, like, the big things he kills, I was, like, just panting and wheezing coming out of those woods by come morning. And this guy's, like, nailing something to a board. Like, I am putting up a contract for a... Oh, you killed it! Thank you, sir! Here's your gold! Like, oh, okay.
I like absolutely love that, because it just makes it so much more realistic. You're not just making the monster appear when you accept the quest.
Yes. I definitely
and you can
appreciate
do it at any
that.
time.
And inadvertently, how you affect certain quests will affect other ones later. You could accidentally kill off a monster that may be important, or a character that is going to be very important
Right. And
later.
sometimes, you run into something like a werewolf and you figure out it's a curse and you actually talk to the monster instead of just killing them automatically.
It's actually a big part of all of the games in general. Actually, in the books as well. Where Geralt seems to have this responsibility to where any living thing that can communicate has a right to be cured first if it wants to, or if it's trying to. And even if there is a huge angry mob back at home who is arguing, saying, no, you need to kill this werewolf, and you go up to it and you find out that, like, it's the daughter of the mayor or something, and if you happen to kill them, now you'll
Striga, and
and so
maybe it just should have died anyway.
You're usually choosing between 2 different bad options. One thing I would definitely not recommend with any of these games is don't touch a guide, because a guide will typically show you what will happen at the end of all of these options, and you will be tempted once you do it the first time to check and see which one gets me the most money, which one do I get more. Wait, well, hold on, but if I kill the succubus, then I get the trophy for it. But what happens if I don't do this? So
I remember as soon
as you look at the game like that, you ruin the game. The game is all about sucking it up and accepting what you did, because it's real life in this world. And you don't want to suck out the video gaminess, or to make it video gamey, by taking that out.
I remembered that we had a rule of thumb, since we were playing it simultaneously. We said, you cannot look at the strategy guide, this beautiful strategy guide that we bought a physical copy of. We can't look at that until our quest is complete.
Right.
Then you can go back and look at it.
Yep, you have to
and
commit.
Check. Maybe, like, if I play this again, maybe I'll do the other.
The fun of the game is in determining, in those tense situations, what are you going to do. And the game even does that thing where it has those timers that pop up, too, when there's a stressful situation thing. Like, throw the baby in the oven.
Oh, my gosh.
That is an actual prompt that pops up.
Throw the baby in the oven.
Throw the baby in the oven. And there's a timer that will pop up.
If you don't, it's going to be real bad. You better throw that baby in the oven.
We should probably add a little bit of context to someone.
We'll get to that in the story part.
Sure,
I have that story written down.
Okay, sure. I didn't think you would. But yeah, the game has lots of moments like that.
I think I had to include it.
It does, actually. The fun of the game, I think, is in committing to something and becoming more and more invested into it. And you do that by, one, relating more to Geralt, because he's actually adding all the personality to the options that you say, as well as he's fully committing to what you tell him to do. And they won't give him an option to do something unless Geralt could possibly have a reason for doing it.
Right. I guess that's kind of like an intersection, because we're already talking about dialogue and stuff.
Yeah.
I love that Geralt... I love how the dialogue options are laid out. So the options sound very blunt, and you're like, I really don't want to say that.
Geralt.
Yeah, you're like, but he never does. He says it in the way that his personality comes through. So, like, it's just the options are written bluntly, so you understand what your
gist.
point is.
Yeah.
And then he will say it in a very Geralt manner, which I always love.
Yeah, he does a lot better job of that. And I want to point out, Witcher 1 did not do this, and it is super frustrating. I didn't really think of it until going backwards to play it, how much better that is in Witcher 3. Because in Witcher 1, you see this enormous sentence, and then you have to read all of your enormous sentence options. You click the one that you want, and then you have to sit through listening to Geralt recite the enormous sentence that you just said. And it's so much better to just see, a tiny little snip that gives you the entire... You know what he's saying.
Of what you need to say, and then...
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then let the conversation continue. Or argument. Or fight. Whichever.
Right. So if we want to talk about fighting, I think talking about the combat is...
Oh, there's so much in combat I didn't get to talk about. I actually just glossed over a lot of things in my video just to briefly say, like, by the way, there's mutagens, there's bombs, there's potions, and there's so much you can do, and they actually fix them so much than the earlier ones. And armor.
It's not an intimidating system combat-wise to get into,
and
or
even
skill
randomized
tree.
weapon drops,
yeah,
too.
Like it's
and
not
armor, I think.
It's not something to be intimidated by, I don't think, at all.
Well, at first, it can feel a little overwhelming until you realize early on, hey, if it's got a bigger number, just put it on. Just use that thing. You're right, the bigger number.
Sometimes there's, like, disadvantages to putting some of that stuff on, though.
Sure, there's level gates, too. Like, you need to be, like, level 7 to pick up that axe you found, or, this spear requires... do you have spears? I don't think you have spears in this. I'm thinking of Dark Souls. There's all sorts of weapons, though. There's tons of weapon classes that you can grab, but typically just using what your good typical silver and steel swords are, that's usually what I stuck to. As soon as I had an option in my Death March run, I went immediately to try and find one of the Witcher School's armor and weapon sets. Mm-hmm. Those are so helpful with trying to take down monsters all over. Aside from the fact that you get actual skill bonuses for them, like the feline set gives you like fast attack bonuses, which a lot of the times, and especially in a game like Dark Souls, you want to do like quick, fast, and just back off at the very last moment, as opposed to like hitting hard with. I think Ursine set does strong attack bonuses.
I think it does, but it's mostly defense.
Yeah, it's a lot of stuff. So armor and weapons will also change your weight, which is another huge aspect of the game. You can become over-encumbered pretty easily if you're not paying attention, and just like you run through, there's this easy bait area in White Orchard that is just this huge dead war zone with just hundreds of bodies everywhere, and you can run around and just start taking all their shirts, their purses, their swords, and then go right back to the merchants and try and sell everything to them, which, by the way, those merchants don't have bottomless pockets. They have a set amount of money. So if you're trying to get all the money you can out of selling to people, or try to take stuff, out of your over-encumbered pocket, you need to find somebody with a lot of money who can actually buy this stuff. And then on top of that, based on what merchants you are and what part of the world, I believe they actually pay out and charge more or less money.
I always went to Novigrad to sell things.
Yeah, there's a great dude in Novigrad who has lots of money, and yeah, that's a great way.
Because he's in a big city, of course he's got lots of money.
Top-notch swords. I know who you're talking about.
He's in the corner next to...
where they burn everybody.
Yeah.
In the books. But mostly the people.
No, in the N3.
What?
When you first get into Novigrad, they're burning a witch right when you get there. They're burning 3 witches.
Yeah, actually, one was from the books.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that character was... It's weird. So that character survived this whole time in the background of the Witcher series, and then just to get killed as soon as you walk into Novigrad.
But think about that. The English-speaking people would never have known that.
Mm-hmm. Well, by that point, though, the novels would have been out by Witcher 3, right?
No, they would not. Witcher 3 came out in 2015, and then the books came out in 2015.
Oh my gosh, so you had to have been on top of that.
In English, so...
Wow. And there's actually, even just callbacks to the books, there's a ton of callbacks to the other games. There is a really, really cool one you can find in Vizima, the castle that Nilfgaard has taken over. There's like a secret wall you can bust open, and you'll find notes and stuff hinting at basically the final boss character of Witcher 1 and other information back when this was not occupied by Nilfgaard. Like, they think so much into everything. And I know we'll get into the story. You're pointing at your notes.
I know. I'm like, let's get back to combat.
I've got a pop shield in my way of her notes. I can't see what you're talking about.
You went from combat straight back into story, into quest
Everything's connected.
I'm trying to keep us on focus so we can talk about... We're talking about gameplay right now. So let's talk about the combats.
Sure.
We got healing items. Like you said, we got healing items, mutagens, potions, bombs, crossbows. Gauge. Silver, steel sword.
I didn't even mention a toxicity gauge, too. So you can't just, like, chug healing potions.
Yeah.
Geralt will actually become so poisoned. His veins will start pulsing.
And you lose health.
He'll become bloodshot. Yeah, your health will start going down. So even if you're chugging Swallow, I think is one of the healing ones, or just trying to eat, or if you're this person right here and you ran out of food and you're going to fight Garrett and you have nothing but alcohol, you could easily get your
beer at the time.
So yeah, your only food to try and heal. Like,
I won.
You're fighting Aerith and you're just chugging,
so blurry. I couldn't see anything.
And what are all the other? There's so many different brands of alcohol and stuff.
But the thing is like I just like didn't. Now in my second playthrough, I sell all of my alcohol, so that would never happen again. Because it kind of ruined my Aerodin fight, even though it was hilarious at the same time. Because my screen is just this blurry mess of like censored pixels.
Luckily, if you're really smart with managing your weight and grabbing extra stuff and trying to sell it quickly, you will rack up a ton of extra cash right away, and you shouldn't really have to worry about the game throwing you into a quest where, like, you're in an auction house and you really want this thing, and if you miss it, it's gone forever. So, yeah, you'll be prepared to actually deal with those. The DLC will also give you a lot of places to sink your money.
So I know we were just kind of talking about that, but healing items, consumable, it's food. You can either have the Witcher potions, but that raises your toxicity level, which could get you poisoned. But if you just eat food, which you can pick off of, like cannibals...
Yeah.
And eat it.
Yeah, well, I don't think... No, you won't eat that. There's one quest you're talking about where there's cannibals and you can pick off an item called strange meat, and Geralt will not eat it.
No, I'm talking about just the ones that say they're chicken. I don't believe it for a minute that it's chicken.
Sure.
But yeah, you'll pick up food and you'll heal, and I like that...
Even if it's raw.
Yes, that you're eating to
Witcher.
Heal yourself, but it's not like I always think of Breath of the Wild where you can pause the game and eat so much
and just
food
become full HP.
That you're fine. Geralt has to eat it in combat.
No, he doesn't have to have like one arm constantly like chewing on a chicken leg while he's like fighting somebody with the other hand. Gameplay, you're just watching your gauge slowly go up after you hear like a little crunch sound.
Right.
So,
yeah, so it's not really like slowing down your gameplay, but also it doesn't feel broken to the point where I don't feel like...
you can't eat your way through everything like Link.
I can't just eat and be okay.
Yeah, that just destroys Breath of the Wild's gameplay.
It's so much. So much so.
I'm also glad you don't do it while paused.
This is something I loved, especially when fighting camps, are bombs.
Yeah, I neglected bombs a lot.
Which is really sad, because that's my first thing. I literally will charge into a bandit camp and throw a bomb. Usually it's Northern Winds.
Bombs have all sorts of effects, too. So there's some that'll have, like, Dimeridium, which Dimeridium will suppress magic.
Right.
There's all sorts of things you can do with bombs.
Like I was just saying, I use Northern Winds a lot, which freezes the whole area.
The best part about bombs and potions in Witcher 3 versus 1 and 2... When you make the formula and you craft it for the first time, you have made it permanently. The game is no longer going to ask you to go back into your inventory and try and gather, 3 of this herb and 2 of this thing and mash them together and make boing,
they
just
come
craft stuff.
back over time is what it was,
over time, they will just replenish themselves. Geralt is just going to do this.
Which is great, because then you're not crafting all the time.
Every open world crafty game do this? It's so like because that's why I didn't throw bombs so much in my first run, because I thought it took me so much to build this. Like getting a white gall is a pain, and then when you finally make something the first time, but you're doing it to perpetually craft something that can always make new ones.
Yeah. And also, there's no cooking in it. Totally not a necessary thing in an open world game. You don't need cooking. Geralt doesn't need to cook.
You don't need it.
In fact, in the DLC, Witcher Blood and Wine, you get a cook.
Yeah.
She's wonderful.
Well, you might get a cook. I don't know.
Don't be like that. Don't be like that.
Well, what's crazy...
don't be like that.
Well, they don't know what I'm talking about, but still, one of the Blood and Wine DLC probably has the most extreme versions of those quests that will split, where, like you just said, you could have... And this is actually something more traditional, where you have, like, say, a monster, oh, you're contracted to kill this thing, or you need to kill this for some reason, do you fight it? Versus, I think it's sentient, let me hang back and wait a bit. And in that instance, had you waited, you would have found out this is a person that was actually cursed, and you can try and revive them, and if you do, then they can actually become a cook and a person who helps you enter your home.
Yeah.
But you would have never have known that, and you probably would have just jumped in and slaughtered them.
Such a sad story. I mean, so many of them are sad stories.
You'll find out much more if you let people survive.
Yeah, so the next other thing in combat, we also have a crossbow.
Yeah, which I wasn't expecting that. That's kind of weird, because 1 and 2 don't do that. I just used it in underwater combat, and occasionally for flying. Oh, it's mandatory underwater for those drowners. It's mandatory underwater, because underwater combat, like most games, is not really hammered out, like fine-tuned, so he doesn't use... The game's not really designed for that, but at least you can. You can't do that in 1 or 2.
Yeah, he won't use swords underwater, and your crossbow just auto-aims underwater, and drowners usually only take 1 or 2 hits.
Sword wouldn't be much good underwater anyway.
So, yeah, and moving on, my favorite thing about combat is critical hits and dismemberments.
Oh my gosh. Which, another very small tangent was trophies. I don't know if it's on your list, but there is a trophy benefit that has just increased dismemberment chance. And on my Death March run, just because I realized, like, oh, I can manage my money well enough. I don't have to keep the one that says, like, +5 gold, +5% gold, or, you know, there's other little effects you can get for hanging a certain trophy on Roach on the side. Even though some are just, like, fun. Like, here's a fiend's head. But, yeah, the dismemberment is lots of fun, because for your killing blow, or if you randomly land a critical hit, I'm not sure exactly how the game calculates it. Geralt will do this special animation, of which there are many, where he will do a very gruesome dismemberment final hit, which is like chopping off arms, legs, heads.
Slice in half. You see legs going flying.
My favorite one's where he like goes up to like tackle and knock somebody over, but all he does is he flips him up into the air and then grabs his sword and scoops up and chops the legs off.
It is gruesome. Do not play this with your children.
Oh no.
And also, you know, dismemberment is such a fun part. I say fun, it's a terrible part, but it's great.
Well, every time you see it, you're not expecting it. That's I think why it's so crazy, because you think you're playing a video game and you're just like...
It's all like slow-mo.
You're like, defeat the enemy, and it, you know, the game like does the... Yeah, it's this moment where it's like, not only did you kill them, you killed them! But worst off, you better not be like in a town in like a street brawl or something, and you whipped your sword out on accident and started killing someone.
So like one of the things with the DLC is that they gave you new dismemberment animations. That's how big of a part it is.
I think that is one of the DLC ones.
It is one of the
where you tackle someone and flip them up in the air and chop the legs off.
So yeah, and you know, you're talking about don't do this in the middle of town. I want to say I took a break from playing.
The game will kind of force you sometimes.
I took a break from playing Blood and Wine one time, and I threw a bomb in the middle of Tucson on accident, and all the guards, all the guards just like surrounded.
So if you do something, if you do something stupid in a town like that, a bunch of guards will show up to attack you. For one, these people who work at these shops are actual people. I'm pretty sure they don't respawn if you murder them, and you will be chased out of town. And I believe remembered for at least a good while by the guards there. And the guards are coded to always be much higher level than you. So you're not going to fight off like 15 of them if you're, 5 levels below at least.
It's better than what you get in Witcher 1.
Oh my god.
If you accidentally do something.
Did I even talk about that in my Witcher 1 video?
I think you did.
Oh my gosh. You get chased by this guy called like the Huntsman or something like that. Just look it up. I don't have time to get into it now. This is already going to be too long. That's just in 1, because 3 it's just all the guards. Oh my god. You keep bringing up trophies, but we've not actually talked about what trophies physically are. Yeah.
So trophies, when you kill a monster, if it's part of a contract,
monster. Yeah.
You will actually cut off their head.
Or if it's a unique monster. Sometimes it's not a contract. If it's like a one-of-a-kind monster.
Yeah.
Or if you didn't have a contract for it. Like, I think the Silver Basilisk didn't act... Maybe it had a contract? I don't remember, but... I think there were some cases where it wasn't the case, and Geralt was like, this is the only one I'll kill in the game. Chop!
So, yeah, it's one of Geralt's animations. He'll stop, he'll cut off the head.
With a different knife.
And sometimes, when it's really small or too human-like, he puts it in a bag and puts it on. And these hang off of your horse, called Brooch. They hang off the side of that, and they give you special abilities based on what you have. You can hold so many of them.
It's cool you can actually see them modeled in this game, because in Witcher 2 you couldn't. They were just little PNGs in the menu.
I loved having, like you were saying, like the Fiend or Wyvern
some
head.
Big thing that you're proud of. You're like, yeah, I don't care if I have this rotting flesh. I killed this.
I don't even care sometimes what the ability is. I just keep something on because I thought it looked cool.
I absolutely did that too. And their abilities are very subtle. They don't do too much. Sometimes it's like 5% damage on humans or something like that. Or something. Not much at all.
And you got to keep an eye on these things because you'll actually miss out on trophies if you decide, okay, that succubus is sentient and I can talk to it. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to kill it. So now you're not going to get the trophy for that.
So that actually will, as a video game, pull you out one of the few things to make you think as a player, okay, I was collecting all these trophies. The trophies don't do very much. Do I actually really want the succubus trophy as an example? Because I think that's the only way to get it. There's one quest in Novigrad where you have an opportunity as a contract to kill a succubus or try to save her and get her out of the city because they're sentient. They know what they're doing. They're still they're technically monsters, but they're just trying to survive.
I think one of the hardest trophies that I did not get is the doppelganger, because that is kind of the same case.
That's another one where you're trying to help somebody. It's even worse because Geralt has a good friend who is a doppelganger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So it's
From
really, I feel like a lot of times Geralt really sympathizes with the monsters a lot in the game.
Maybe because the people are so racist towards him that they kind of all mesh together as monsters in his head. I can easily see that.
Like everything's just a monster to him.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if it's human or actual creature. Mm-hmm. Another combat thing that was added in DLC are the Hans bases.
Oh my gosh, I was so excited when I figured out what those were. Take advantage of the fact that the world is so enormous and can have so many people in it, and push the game to its limit. Have like 100 guys patrolling and guarding this huge keep, and one boss guy on top leading them all. Your goal would then be to either stealthily get in and stop people from lighting torches, which if they do, more people from other Hans bases around will flood the place, and it will feel like 1,000 guys on you.
But they're so much fun.
Oh, it's so cool.
So much fun.
Because by that point in the game, Geralt is really overpowered. So it's like really putting him to the test. Can you beat 100 guys if they all aggro on you? Because if this one guy runs off with a torch, he will run up to the top, light the place, and you'll get swarmed.
They'll get more, yeah.
And you can either run after him to try and stop him, run up to the top, and I believe you stop the whole thing if you just kill the guy in charge.
I think so.
But it's really hard to. It's like a boss character.
Right. So that was a DLC thing added in Blood and Wine, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Blood and Wine.
Also, another thing that was added in DLC like Hearts of Stone were the runes you can add to it. So we didn't even talk about runes that you can add to swords and
Hearts of Stone added a lot more to it, but there was still like runes that you could pack into like your armor.
There were it wasn't. They aren't called runes, because runes are the Hearts of Stone thing, and then there was a separate thing that you had before.
I thought they were just called runes, and then in Hearts of Stone they were something else. It doesn't matter. But still, there's like powered up runes that this guy you can sink a ton of money into to power up your runes. I never really thought his ability was that worth it.
Yeah.
I cared much more about making my armor and weapons just better, as opposed to trying to buff them more. But still, if you're trying to make like a ridiculous build with Geralt with a very helpful mutagen, a very good armor set ability that is compounding on top of runes and stuff, you can make Geralt have like 75% chance of dismemberment, ridiculous critical hit chances. You choose one direction and you can just push him towards it so far he can be insane.
And that's the same with like the skill tree that you had. Like I always try to make sure I get Fire Stream right away in that skill tree.
Oh, I love Fire Stream. Because you can shoot it while backing away
and holding
it like a flamethrower.
We didn't even talk about signs. We didn't even talk about signs.
Yeah, Geralt has magic.
Geralt has magic signs.
Light magic. There are sorcerers that are way more powerful than you, but you at least have like light magic.
Geralt can do 4 basic things. So they're in this game. They're all slightly different Oh, 5.
There's 5 signs.
5. So they're all slightly different in 1 and 2 versus 3. They all do slightly different things.
Well,
but...
for the most part, like Ard and Igni, you know, it's force or fire. But the one that really changes up a lot is Yarden. It's in 3, if he will like throw the sign on the ground that causes this circle that will either make ghosts tangible, so you can start fighting wraiths, which I love that idea. Because before, it was just like this little coalesced spot on the ground like lightning, and if someone stepped in it, it was like a Monster Hunter shock trap, like bzzz, and they would stand there for a minute and you would wail on them and they would get out of it.
Oh,
so
that's not bad.
Yeah.
But at least that seems more diverse than using it in 3.
The other 2 are Quen, which is like a defensive thing you can cast on yourself to have like extra shield, which is super helpful.
Yeah, it's great. It's a one-hit thing, so once you get hit, you know, it's gone. But
right, and then there is Axii, which lets you kind of possess either characters in dialogue options if it's leveled up enough.
It's pretty much the Force from Star Wars, like.
Yeah, sort of. Yeah, these are not the droids you're looking for. Or it can be done in combat in order to, if you level it up, stun an enemy or have them turn against their allies. This is another thing. You can level all of these up, and they can do different things. Like your Quen shield can explode and damage enemies that hit you and set it off. Like I said, you can have better options in dialogue.
Basically, I just level up Igni to the most powerful thing I could do.
I'd say the most important one to do first is Axii. You need to be able to have those dialogue options.
That is very true, because
sometimes
if you don't
put
have
you're put in a terrible situation.
You'll end up having to fight like 5 guards instead of just using Axii and getting through it.
Walk right through it because these are not the droids you're looking for.
Or you're going to pay a ton of money because you
true.
can't do Axii.
I'm telling you, it adds up. Axii is great, but you can like just level it up to like 3 or so, and then go crazy on the others.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, there's a lot of, like, just in the signs, there's a lot of personality what you can put into Geralt, but I think the mutagens are where it really is.
Which are also kind of like a skill tree, I guess you could say, but you, like, equip them at different ways, and they work together to do different things, depending on how you have them equipped.
Yeah, so you would choose, you have, like, skills that you are unlocking on a main tree, and you kind of pay for them with your level up points. And you will pick these abilities, and you will get to use them by, like, kind of collecting them together in links on Geralt's board, and then based on what color mutagen you put next to it, you'll get additional buffs. So you get, like, a bunch of red attack ones, and you put a red mutagen there, you get an even higher increase to your attack. So you could just go all in on attack, or all in on, like, vitality, and make Geralt just even further go into the direction that you want. I found that so much fun. And
then at one point in the game, you've actually find a scientist base to level up your mutagens to like a higher level.
Yeah.
And get even more buffs and stats from that.
It's under your lovely orchard winery that you find in Tucson.
There's a Broxa down there.
Yeah, there's a Broxa down there. But still, you level this up, and you get even more specific stuff that you can level up with Geralt, and it's really cool.
There is one more big thing I want to talk about gameplay, and then we can move on.
From gameplay, because I want to remind you, this is already the length of a normal HITBOX episode.
I can't help it.
I told her this was going to be a massive episode.
Okay, the last thing, we just got to briefly talk about Gwent. It's a thing.
Oh my gosh.
It replaces dice poker.
I love Gwent.
It's a card game.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's an expansion in the DLC.
Oh, and so a whole new deck to find and cards. So the hardest quest in the entire game is to complete your Gwent deck.
So that's the thing. Gwent is totally optional. You do not need to play it.
In your tutorial White Orchard, there's a guy who wants to play with you, and he teaches you, and he gives you this initial quest.
Right, so you'll do that one. But
right, yeah. Well, you don't have to. You really don't have to do anything.
I think you have to. I think he gives you information about Yennefer.
I don't think he does. I'm pretty sure a certain other character does.
He is that character.
The guy you're thinking of who actually teaches you, he's like a professor from Oxenford.
Oh, you're right, because he dies
later.
He
dies. You actually, when you first go to Velen, I believe, because each, and this is an important thing to mention, each person who you can play in Gwent is, now, there's no stakes if you lose. I think you just lose some money. But if they lose, they will not only pay you the money from the ante, but you will also get one unique card from them. And that's how you collect your cards. Now, if you passed up and you didn't play this guy, you will get his card later in the game. The game kind of covers this. by finding his corpse hanging from the hangman's tree.
He was lynched because he kept traveling into battlefields.
Yeah. He was trying to study battlefields or something like that. But there's a story for everything, and there's a reason for everything, which is the attention to detail that I really love.
But it's really great that Gwent's an optional thing, because it might not be everybody's cup of tea. But keep in mind, if it's optional, you're always going to have that quest there at the top that says collect them all. It's always going to be there.
Well, I did it twice. I did it in both versions of my games, and it was a lot of fun. I really like Gwent. Even though it's once you figure it out, it's very basic. I know that Gwent, the game, not inside Witcher 3 Gwent, is much more advanced, though I heard they were shutting it down or something like that.
I don't know. I could never get it to work correctly on my computer.
I know that it doesn't play by the same rules as Gwent does in Witcher 3.
Well, I think if it did, it would be really broken and wouldn't really work. If you're playing against a regular person. Playing against an NPC, there's like... You go through certain steps and you're going to win every time. Like,
assuming you have the right cards. That's the thing. It's very much a Yu-Gi-Oh situation where the rich player is going to win. So if you're Geralt with like the opening deck and you've not modified it, you're not going to win the later matches. You had to have started playing all the other people to... And they will semi-randomize what they give you. You can't just look up online and find who's the person who gives me that legendary elf that just says draw 2 cards. It's Bill from Pokemon.
But you can look up and see who all you can fight for Gwent.
Yes,
so that
fight for Gwent.
Fight for them.
Don't actually try and kill anybody. They're not going to drop their card. You would have just lost it. So anyway, there's more I want to talk about with the gameplay, but I'm sure we could easily wrap up that stuff in the other segments of this, because this is already an enormous episode, and I already kind of knew this was going to happen, but... To be fair, I'm fine with Hitbox episodes being a little longer anymore, because now they're 100% going to be on listening devices. You can just be hearing this on Spotify, if not other places by this point, so I don't mind. So we're finally moving on to the graphics segment.
Also, if you're a big podcast person like me, I listen to it 8 hours a day, so I don't care how long it is.
Yeah, well, we still try. We don't want to make them too short. If anything, too short, I think, is less interesting than too long for a podcast. So, yeah, I know what you mean.
I mean, is there a lot to say about the graphics session?
Yeah, there's a lot. Can I say one thing I think is really cool?
Okay.
That another big thing, we just talked about gameplay, how I think Witcher 3 does a bunch of things right that modern games today still can't do. Witcher 3 has so many dialogue segments where, one, you're making interesting choices with the story, which is also engaging, and we'll get to that later. But in most video games, when they have to do this, they will have 2 people shoulder to shoulder to look straight at each other and lock eyeballs and just like blabber, move their mouths, and they might have a couple default animations that they do.
Square Enix.
Square does it. I mean, the longer the game is, it doesn't even matter who the developer is. Like Xenoblade Chronicles, I love those games, but they're so long and there's so many quests, they have to put default animations on certain characters to get through all of that stuff so that you can have all those quests. Witcher 3, even though it is equally enormous, will have characters looking around the room and doing things, fidgeting with stuff inside their environment while they're talking with you. And between dialogue options, if you have more that will go back to that same tree of dialogue options, they will find a way with the stuff they were fidgeting with and doing or looking out windows, they will work their way back to where they started again, so they will seamlessly be able to move to the next animation of what you would ask them to do or what you would tell them. Or you can break off the conversation and just start attacking somebody. But you can do so much more. Like they're real people now. And that's all they had to do. I say that's all they had to do, but that's a ton of work. Asking like this one character who you're going to see one time is going to have 2 to 3 completely different, unique animations we won't use anywhere else in the rest of the game, just to make him look like a real person when you're talking to him.
I just enjoy that they're always looking around with their eyes too. They're not just staring blankly at you the whole time. Also, if you leave Geralt on a dialogue option for too long, I feel like he starts looking like he's getting bored.
Yeah, but even still, when you're sitting there for a really long time, it almost looks like he's thinking about what to say. And it's of course it's going to be unnatural. It's another thing where you put the controller down, go take a crap, and you come back and Geralt's still standing there. That's always going to be weird, but the game has to keep going. But Geralt will like move his head around. He's thinking about what he's saying. He's like kind of rolling everything over, and you can see his brain working just with the animation. It's really well done.
mainly a thing I want to talk about is how different consoles render the game and how it looks on each of the consoles.
You know, since you brought that up, I have still not gotten to try out the new upgrade patch for the PS5 and the PC.
Well, yeah, but I mean, it's not going to look good until it's on PS5.
But no, PC would look better.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. I could see the PC looking a lot better. But the thing's on the Switch, too, and it still looks pretty good.
Yeah, it got graphically dumbed down somehow, but yeah, the people have their own texture mods and stuff to make it look even better, which I don't even need that. That's like the limit to me for like how good a game can look, and I'm not gonna complain that, you know, this big pile of fruit or books or something isn't interactable or something. The more
I can take
detail.
Witcher 3 on the go. Who cares?
Well, right. It's the gameplay I think is more important, and the graphics. If you're trying to make the game look realistic, like this is, I feel like the good limit for a video game, because any more than this, you're gonna make me have to wait longer, because every single one of those books in a pile I could knock over, meaning that the pages have this flutter animation they can do, or like pages can be sent out, or like the spines of the books can move and things can animate in different ways. You can knock over the big pile of fruit and they will all individually bounce across the floor. I don't need that, you know?
Yeah, that's fine. You know, I never even really thought about that. There's not too much in the... Like what we talked about when we were playing in our FF7 remake, we talk about physics all the time. But
but the physics are funny. That's why the physics don't behave properly. You run into a big pile of boxes and it's silly how they'll just like... You can just walk casually into a giant pile of concrete and it'll move like it's made of styrofoam or something.
Yeah.
That's what was funny about that. But that kind of stuff does slow the game down, and it's not necessary. Sometimes it needs to be there, like destructible stuff in combat scenes. Those are great. If you're fighting in like a laboratory, I want to see broken glass, and I want to see like pieces of wood from chairs flying all over the place. And that happens in Witcher 3, but you don't need the rest of the stuff that absolutely doesn't matter. You can already in this game walk into a huge bustling city with no loading zones, or loading screens, nothing. Go into any single person's house. Maybe this is another important thing here that is also kind of the graphics. It's like the set piece of the game. You can also follow any character you meet in this huge city, and they have their own lives. They will do their own thing without you being there. They might open shop somewhere at one point, only for certain hours of the day, go off and do certain things. Some of them will even have dates with each other. There was a date spot in Novigrad.
How many times that had happened where I made it to a shop, but it was like 1 a.m., and I went over next door and I found the character's house or something like that. And then found them sleeping. And I waited inside, and they get up and they do their morning thing. Like the wife will go and start getting breakfast ready, and then the husband will go back out to the shop.
Clean some clothes, they go shopping.
I'll go out and I'll follow them back, or I've just meditated in their shop all night long and waited for them to come back.
That's really cool. It's like the entire game's, like, all the characters, I don't even want to call them NPCs, because they're all so full, even though they are the lowest of the low on, you know, this person runs a shop. And that's it. But they do all this extra stuff. It's like Majora's Mask, but Majora's Mask is a 3-day cycle, but this is continuous.
Yeah.
I don't understand how they did this.
This
is incredible.
Even some characters who won't go out and do their jobs if it's like raining or something like that.
Yeah, they do different things based on weather or states of the game.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
One of the big things I want to talk about with graphics is I love the icon art. You had mentioned it in your video as well. You talked about the icon art for like
the
all the
little
different
PNG
food,
files.
the little PNG files.
Oh wow, yeah. There's so much. I tried to show like a picture on screen at one point. Like, this is just some of them, and there's like, you know, you can go at any point and pick up like a random sandwich or a turkey leg, and every single thing has its own unique thing of art, and you will be overwhelmed if you start picking up all this stuff with how much art there is just in distinguishing what every little thing looks like.
And then, you know, it's great even when you get into DLC and you travel to Tucson, there's new types of food that you can pick up.
They have so much alcohol. And it's all new images. Yeah, they could have just said like
pictures.
Yeah, the older games, you know, if you have like there is a beer and there is a wine bottle, and that's your alcohol. It's one of the other pictures. But there's dozens.
Yeah.
I don't know how many there are.
Honestly, I have sat there and admired the different types of items. Throwaway items, there's so many different icons.
Yeah, it was at least one person's entire job for probably a couple years just to make icons for every possible conceivable
I could imagine
thing.
that being a 3-person job where one person literally
all the
is
weapons too.
doing the sketches, the next person does color layout, and another person does shading and like all the weapons, all the armor, because they're all unique drops.
Which
you can look
scale
like an absolute clown at the beginning of the game with the type of
if you
armor
are
that
putting
get.
stuff on, that's just based on, well, I have my opening stuff, it has this, it might have this ability or whatever, but this new one I got drops and you can put it on at level 7. It looks kind of stupid. I can't believe it's stronger, but those numbers are bigger. And if the numbers are bigger, that means you're safer.
But I also do appreciate, though, that, like, your armor is never going to have lower defense than your t-shirt.
Well, yeah, but it also encourages you to
out.
go out and try and say you uncovered some quest that says, I found like a breadcrumb on this trail to find the Viper armor set. Bad example, that's the DLC one. I love that armor, by the way. But say you find like breadcrumbs of a new Witcher set, and you want to go get that because you want to stop wearing rags, and it has to be better, and it will be for a good long while too. You could wear it for most of the game.
I think that's one of the main things that really encouraged me to go seek out armor sets. Is I just didn't want to look like trash anymore. I wanted something that matched and made me look like a Witcher again.
Yeah, for sure. Otherwise, you're basically wearing the fallen loot you got off of the dead guys.
Well, I mean, I guess you could keep wearing your wolf school armor, but it's just not strong.
No, it's for level 1. Yeah, you're in trouble with that. Also, if you really love the wolf school, basically the default armor of what you would think Geralt looks like, that's what makes the Viper set so cool. It's basically that same design, but a little more black instead of brown. And it is endgame, so it's really powerful and has a lot of great skills to it. So it's a really good one to go, like, you start wearing that armor and you kind of work your way back to that same look.
Yeah, and it's also nice that by that point in the game, you can also change the color of parts of your armor as well.
You can dye everything. You can be pink. Things. I think I was pink Viper for a...
You were not.
Yeah, I was.
What are you, pink horse, everything?
It was around that time, yeah. It was my Metal Gear Solid 5 playthrough, shameless plug, is what she was referencing.
Another thing, I mean, we didn't even talk about yet. Well, we did a little bit with armor, but monster and character design.
Oh, yeah. I really wanted to get back to this, because there's a lot of games out there that are taking existing things and making their own design spin on it. We talk about Shin Megami Tensei a lot.
Yeah.
Because those are taking existing mythological deities, urban legend characters, all sorts of things from mythologies, and making them all look like their own world. They all fit in Shin Megami Tensei, and they all look good. And that's hard to do, especially with something that broad of a scope. This is doing something similar, where I feel like other games try the same sort of thing. They'll look for a lot of basic monsters that are just in fantasy, and try to make them fit their own game. And sometimes the games are personally so fantasy that they're not cohesive, and some I'm just taken out of, like, it's a little too magical. There's something about Witcher that feels like you could live in this world, and even though there is actual magic in it, there's nothing that's so, like, nonsensical it takes you out of it. The game follows its own rules, like, verbatim. So everything that is, like, say, like, the Leshen is kind of magical and weird. It has rules that it follows. There are totems for a Leshen, and there's ways to hunt down and find where the totems are, and how it affects and has its influence over the townsfolk.
Roaming the whole time either. It's just like the characters we talked about. The monsters have a set idle. They're gonna go do certain things. They're gonna be in certain areas, certain times of the day.
They will also honor the lore of what those creatures are, and sometimes even go to further extremes, because something that happens in one of the earlier Witcher books is Geralt will go through a bunch of old fairy tale stories, which you kind of do in the later DLC. You do some fairy tale stories again, but this in Witcher, it makes like a darker twist on it, where you would think in their world we have that version of that story because they were trying to dumb this down for kids, even though it is an awful story. Think like Hansel and Gretel or something, and it's still like, it's like a terrible thing. You don't want to tell kids, like, oh, there's this witch in the woods that you can, you send your child out into the woods, which happens in Witcher with this trail of candy, but you're doing it in order to kill them because they're bad kids and you don't want them anymore. that's what
or
happens.
Or you can't afford to take care of them.
Or you can't afford to take care of them. Yep, that was
and
several.
We'll definitely talk about that part in the story. That's a huge story part for me.
Yeah, but graphically, I meant like the design of the monsters. They are all, or just creatures. Monster isn't even fair because some of them are very sentient. They honor what they were, but they all fit the Witcher world in a way that makes sense for them.
I mean, that's kind of like, I just kind of want to talk about the spectrum even of just characters and not necessarily creatures.
Yeah, like the crones are kind of creatures, but they're characters.
But like, I think my spectrum, I think of, you have Uma, and then you have Anna and Rieta, and I'm like, these are totally opposite ends of the spectrum, but they both fit in this world very, very well.
And the godlings.
Yeah,
also,
godlings.
Yeah, they're more characters. You can treat them as monsters.
If
you want to.
You can. That's such a bad idea.
Geralt shouldn't.
I think godlings are a lot stronger than from my understanding.
Well, I don't know. Yeah, they're very mysterious and also gentle creatures, so there's no reason you would ever do that.
Yeah, they're just kind of tricksters a lot of times. So.
It kind of, this is more of a story thing, but each thing also has like its own lore written behind it in your kind of journal compendium bestiary thing that you're accumulating. And if anything, if you're not even going for the trophies, it's good enough to get that information and read it. It's also all written in the perspective of Dandelion reciting his stories based on your experience, and you pass it on to Dandelion, and he then writes it in your journal. But that's like how you would learn about the godlings being much more powerful if this is your first Witcher game. Though godlings, I don't think appeared in Witcher 1 and 2. I think. I could be wrong.
I mean, that's another big thing. There's more creature designs in 3. And you're talking about Shin Megami Tensei and things like that, where there's just so many creatures galore. It's a smaller bestiary than that, but each of them are
huge.
So flushed out, and it's still so large.
Yeah.
And there are some things that people might consider like palette swaps, but I almost consider, a grave hag and a water hag to be just totally different things.
They have totally different animations and models.
They just do different things.
It's like saying Rathian is a palette swap of Rathalos from Monster Hunter. And they are absolutely not the same monster.
They do not, no.
They don't even fight in the same places. They're completely different, and that's what a water hag and a grave hag is. And there's other stuff that is like that in Witcher, but there's nothing that is just a palette swap like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure, like arachnids might use the movesets and animations of other arachnids, but that's about as much of a correlation as you're going to get.
Right, and the same as like other foglets and things like that, but a Bruxa's not going to fight the same as...
An Alp?
Yeah, as an Alp.
No, God, Alps are scary.
And those are types of vampires in the game, if people don't know. I mean, everything's creature-wise, it's still divided into categories, I guess there's like humanoids, insectoids, vampires.
Oh yeah, there's tons of classes, and you will actually have, this is another one we didn't even talk about for gameplay, there's oils that you can craft for each class, including humans. And you will coat your weapon in this and have say 10 minutes of extra damage for that thing. So if you know you're going into a spider nest, and these spiders are like 4 feet tall, then yeah, you might want to coat your weapon with insectoid oil so you can try and tear through them a lot faster. Figure out what's the best combination of mutagens and skills in your main tree, get a better mashup of what armor skills are going to work for this. Or you could just run in there and start carving at them, because you really don't have to think about optimizing Geralt too much. Just running in, you're usually fine. If your level's okay. Yeah.
And you're not
I
drunk.
beat the whole game on Death March. I did some really risky, stupid things, but I got really good at this game. So if you're really good at the combat, you don't need to stress over it too much.
Yeah, and with the combat, just because we didn't talk about gameplay, you do have like a stamina gauge.
Oh, we didn't talk about
dodging.
gameplay.
We need to go back and talk about gameplay.
We gotta talk about gameplay.
I'm not doing gameplay. No, I guess just my main thing is just amazing how many different types of characters can fit into this world. How many different types of characters they've designed. And, you can definitely see a difference between lower classes and upper classes. And you get to see how they live. Some people live in the city, but they're not, an upper class. But they're living better than the peasants that are on the outsides of the city.
In the slums and the outskirts.
In the slums, and
But the main characters, a good chunk of them are coming from the books, and very few of the monsters are actually coming from the books. When, the book describes a monster, typically the books, which is kind of weird, I've kind of picked up on, I think they're actually written in the context assuming that you are a person already living in this world, so it doesn't bother to explain to you what these things are.
You know, yeah, I've never really thought about that reading the book, because I just know what some of those things are already.
Well, right,
so
but the book doesn't explain to you, like, what an Ekimara is, and it assumes you would know that as it describes what it's doing. So a person who's just reading this and not seeing anything, now their imagination's going wild of what kind of monstrosity is this,
right.
Which of course has to be solved in the video game. We got to actually see and figure out what it is and classify everything, and of course there is an answer to it. The game is consistent with everything. It has like a cheat sheet that it keeps going back to make sure, like, aside from all the wars and stuff he has to keep track of while writing these, but the answers are all in the game, and everything's honored properly. Except I found, ironically, with an Ekimara, there's one weird little problem that bothers me a lot. I think the game, in its description, calls it a higher vampire, and then, or somewhere on the lines it says it's a lesser vampire, but then in dialogue somewhere, Geralt will say the opposite.
Is it Ekimara, or is it the Catachan?
I think it was Ekimara, but I could be wrong. Regardless, they're lesser. They're definitely not higher vampires. After you beat Blood and Wine, you know what a higher vampire is. And it ain't that. So, no, it's not that.
It's one of my favorite lines from that fight is...
If you have any gods, pray to them now.
Or if you believe in any
gods. Or if you honor any gods, or something along those lines, yeah.
I love that. This is a wonderful fight.
This is a terrifying fight.
But it's great because you encounter so many creatures that Geralt typically respects, or will not fight, or knows that they're a lot stronger
or he's friends
than
with.
he is.
Some are from the books. Yeah, he's friends with a couple monsters from the books too. And
I
there's
hate
a
calling
lot of
them monsters because they're just characters.
Yeah, they are. They're just characters. For example, Regis shows up in the book. In early on, about halfway through.
Right, and
he's a higher vampire.
Oh, what's his name? It's not Polly. Doppelganger friend.
Dodo. Doodoo.
That's a great chapter in the book, just because I didn't remember his name. It's a really good chapter in the book, though, and he comes back in the game. I really wish I would have read the book first, because then I would have been like, Doodoo!
It's Doodoo! Yeah, Geralt almost killed you. Same for Regis. Man. Yeah, Geralt, it really took a long time to get to be buddy-buddy with a vampire.
Right.
Especially one who was concealing the fact that he was a vampire for a long time.
Right.
But that's the thing, higher vampires are so powerful. They are probably the most powerful creature that you ever see in the entire game. Outside of Hearts of Stone's DLC and a certain...
incarnation of just evil.
Yeah, what is probably just known as the incarnation of evil. Unkillable incarnation of evil.
But that's what DLC's for, right?
Yep, the endgame ridiculous stuff that Geralt should not be able to do. Even at this point, starting the beginning of Witcher 3, Geralt, honoring the history of the books and the first two games, has done so much. He doesn't need to prove himself. Just go rest. You're done. You're already this legendary guy who has done so many things. Just stop, man. And then at the end of 3, he has a vineyard. He can live happily ever after.
He can.
But instead, no, he goes off and he does what he does in Hearts of Stone and Blood and Wine. And oh my gosh.
Well, that's the thing, like...
Blood and Wine you kind of had to for the vineyard. But...
Right, I think chronologically it's just easier to do Blood and Wine last and do all of that story stuff
just
last.
So he can end there.
Yeah.
I think Hearts of Stone happened first anyway.
I think so. I think it was
so that's fine.
first.
So we can move on.
I think we can move on.
Okay, good, because time-wise is already really long.
Because the story is going to be huge.
Oh, man. Well, we're not going to tell the whole story.
No,
Probably
but I tried to, hit big, side quests or big main quests.
Okay.
Story points.
Take me through your list.
Which I tried to get things in order.
We kind of talked about the White Orchard beginning, feeling like this... self-contained thing that it could have been the entire game that you paid for because it was so well done.
Right.
And then it opens up and teaches you what the greater story is. You're not looking for Yennefer, you're looking for Ciri.
I don't even feel like we need to talk about White Orchard much because it has such a little... What I was going to talk about actually was the thing that happens immediately after White Orchard, which you were going to be talking about.
Are we going to talk
earlier.
Spoilers, by the way? Just assume.
Yeah.
Okay, so just letting you know, if you haven't played it, I assume by this point you've already played Witcher 3.
So the first thing I actually wanted to talk about was something you had mentioned earlier, and that was how you get Letho in your game. And those dialogue options, because you were talking about, well, if I had played Witcher 2 on my PC and saved it,
it's the only way. It had to have been PC to PC. And of course, I played. I did play it PC on both, but I didn't play Witcher 2 before Witcher 3.
So, from my understanding, these dialogue options when you go to the castle in Vizima to talk to Emperor Emir
for the first time, right after leaving White Orchard.
And
you don't realize you're doing this, by the way, but you are basically answering questions that define what you did previously to this, so that the game can set up these things that it doesn't know what you played.
Like side quests and characters can be dropped in.
Yeah, did this character die? Is this person in prison? Or is this person alive and loose?
It's really only 2 characters that get affected by this, and that's the Letho and the witch.
I forget her name. But yeah, I know. Yeah, I forget. Yeah, it doesn't end for her either way very well. She's, I think, the mother of the children. It was a big thing in Witcher 2. I'm forgetting their names.
This section almost like really just kind of catches you up on what had happened. It's another thing where I want to say, like, you can know nothing about this stuff going into it.
Oh, and this all went over my head too. It didn't even matter.
Like when I first did it, I had no idea. I'm just lucky that I picked one to where Letho was still in my game.
Unfortunately, I picked one where Letho was dead. And to be fair, when I ended up playing Witcher 2, I think that's what Geralt should do. So I was like, whatever, that's fine.
Letho is the main villain in 2?
If you want to call him a villain, he's... This is
doing
another thing
his
about
job.
villains.
I don't know.
That's the thing about bad guys in Witcher, just in general. They're not just bad guy to be bad guy.
Unless
they're
you're the
all
incarnation of evil, then I guess.
Well, yes. But they're the protagonists of their own story. They're doing what's right for them.
Right.
Even Emperor Emir, the nastiest guy in charge of basically the invading Holy Roman Empire is what he's supposed to be.
You can to what he's doing, and you kind of understand what he's dealing with, you know?
Yeah, and why he wants Ciri as well. So this is kind of how you start the game. You are given a quest by Emir to track down and bring him Ciri, which it's up to you whether you want to actually fulfill that and bring Ciri to him, or hunt down Ciri because you basically just found out she's in danger.
I mean, you can make that option, but I like to say it's more up to Ciri the way that things are worded. But
yeah. But so one thing you wouldn't know is who Ciri is from the books, and she is sort of, this doesn't really happen in the games, really, but the law of surprise is a big thing in the books, and it's basically, so Geralt fulfills some quest for somebody, and turns out they can't pay him. Well, he can enact what's called the Witcher law of surprise, which is that person now owes him something that they don't know that they have yet. And so it's whatever this next thing is. And this tends to be a child of a pregnant woman. That
or in my case, when I was playing the board game, it was his grandmother. And
yeah, that's fun. It's in the board game as well. But so in Ciri is this case, and she, unfortunately, due to ridiculous fate, ends up being the last of this line of elvish elder blood. Which gives her ridiculous magic abilities that nobody else has, but everybody wants. And aside from the fact that everybody wants her for those abilities, they also want her because she's the last survivor of the royalty of a country known as Sintra. And Sintra collapsed in the books. It was previous to all the games. But because of that, she was the princess of Sintra. People are trying to wed her off in order to help dominate these lands and, force the people under your rule easier, saying, oh, well, our emperor wed your princess, and now you all belong to us.
And through a bunch of other weird strings of things, she is also technically the princess of Nilfgaard as well.
Technically, yeah, sort
of.
So, well,
yes.
I don't... See, that's weird.
You gotta read... Since it's very muddy... It's muddy, but
it's really muddy, because Nilfgaard is who invaded and sacked Sintra. So it's really, there's a lot that's really confusing about it, but it really doesn't matter. All you need to know is Ciri's in a very dangerous spot. She's on the run. Lots of humans are after her, but also the Wild Hunt is after her.
And a lot of other monsters, just because they want to eat her for her blood and gain her powers. So,
yep, there's elves like Avalok who are just trying to research what Ciri is and manipulate her.
Most of the time it's for personal gain. Really, the only friends Ciri has out there are Geralt, Triss, and Yennefer.
Basically, the only parental characters that she knows, as her family was killed in Sintra, and she was finally basically given over to Geralt, even though he had to hunt her down in the books. As I mentioned, this had to happen previously, where you had to hunt down Ciri, because of the fact that Nilfgaard was sacked, and this whole series of things happen after she is trained to be a Witcher without the Trial of the Grasses.
Yes.
I believe, yeah.
Yeah.
Because otherwise she might have died. That's like 90% chance that people
to do that. And
die.
They refused to do that to a woman, too.
Yeah, right.
From my understanding.
I think
that
so.
was only for young boys. So there's a lot of backstory to things like that, but you don't really need to know any of that.
No, but that's like the main thing that sets you off. And from this point on, since you don't know how close you are to finding anything, you just have vague hints that some baron somewhere might have seen her, and there was some murmurings in the city of Novigrad. And I think that's it. That's all you get.
And you're just like,
you have to go figure out what that means and figure out where
now,
where to take that.
They will have it labeled like this is your main quest, so you assume it might have something with Ciri.
Mm-hmm. And that will branch off into other things, because you will find that baron, and you will get many quests with that baron. In fact, he's probably my favorite spin side story in the game.
I did want to talk about, because I was trying to go in chronological order, but I guess when
I didn't skip too much.
I guess when it comes to quests, there isn't too much of a chronological order.
No, because, you can do all these you can ignore the main quest and get up to level 50.
First, before I talked
40.
about
I think 40 was the cap before the DLC.
The Bloody Baron, because I do want to talk about that one. I absolutely love that quest. I wanted to talk about Keira Metz.
Yeah, it's a lot of quests that kind of boil down to the harder you try to help someone and do the right thing, you end up doing them dirty, and you make them have the worst tragic end possible. It's almost like a Dark Souls character story, but those are all deliberate things that are just going to happen to a character anyway. Witcher, you're in dialogue. You're doing your best to try and puzzle solve things, or not really puzzles, but like figure out what's the best scenario for everyone. I don't want any. Well, also, and stay neutral, because you don't want to anger certain huge communities or even countries. And even just upset your own friends.
I think
they
that's
won't remember
one of the
these
hardest things in Tucson, because you're like, I don't want to be an enemy of the vampires, but I also
don't want to be an enemy of the entire
Duchess
country.
After me.
Oh no.
So I think Keira Metz is also one of those first quests that you get along with the Baron, saying like, there's this witch near the outskirts of town. I keep saying witch, but sorceress.
They use it interchangeably in Witcher.
And that she might have some information regarding this. And this quest threw me for a loop, because first you do kind of like the main quest, and you meet the Wild Hunt for the first time.
You do.
In the game. So you get to fight your first boss fight. Which
is something kind of weird. I know we're already way over time, but hey, screw it. The Wild Hunt does this really weird thing. So they're in the books, and they are like a mythological, I think, Irish or Celtic thing.
It's Polish.
I'm
pretty sure it's Polish.
You sure?
Yeah, I remember I had looked it up, and it is this thing that happens over the night skies of like...
Julius Caesar killed all these people, so everything's muddy. Who knows? Who is basically Emperor Emir in Witcher. There's like one-for-one different regions of the world are different real-life civilizations.
Well, it doesn't
but anyway,
help that he's trying to wipe out sorceress.
Yeah.
Top of that, but that's also King Radovid doing that too. And
anyway, so in the books, the Wild Hunt exists, and they do show up in Witcher 1. You do speak with the King of the Wild Hunt, assumedly it's Eredin, and he is very much an incorporeal ghost floating skeleton. And that's what they're described as in actual mythology and in the books. But then you get to Witcher 3, which I think then they kind of had to retcon this, and they have this new design where I think they look really cool.
There's nothing. I have no problem
skeleton,
with what they did.
It's like skeleton armor is what they look like. And you will find out much later in the story they're not actually skeletons. They can take off this this mask, which is distorting their voice too in a really creepy fashion. But they're real people. I want to say people, but they're actually elves, like pureblood elves from another dimension that are blipping over into ours because they know that Ciri's here and they're after her, and jumping between
because they want
dimensions.
her power to continue taking over the rest of the dimensions. Yes, we got into parallel dimensions in this game. It is a thing.
Well, the book does it too. Ciri is really powerful. They call her the Lady of Time and Space because she can blip in and out she will do this in combat too. When you do get to play as Ciri at certain points in the story too.
Yeah, I was going to talk about
point.
that with Baron's quest.
Yeah,
it's like the first time
she gets to kind of teleport around instead of having like quick and long dodge attacks. Mm-hmm. She could just like teleport on the other side of people. It makes them so easy to fight unless you get overwhelmed. But yeah, she's very powerful, and that's why they're after her. But I thought it was really weird how this is like one of the only inconsistencies in Witcher where they had to retcon what Aroden and the Wild Hunt looked like.
Yeah, and it's kind of understandable at that point.
I feel like the remake, they're going to fix that.
Yeah, they probably will. They'll probably go with what their new designs are. And
but granted, I think one of the first times you encounter Aroden, you're in some random dude's basement in Vizima, and he's just standing there.
In Witcher 1.
In Witcher 1. And you go up to him like, oh, King of the Wild Hunt? What are you doing?
Because Geralt should know who he is, though, at that point.
Oh, yeah.
Based on the book.
Yeah,
right?
So weirdly enough, Geralt actually rode with the Wild Hunt for a while.
Yeah.
It's weird. There's a lot of backstory and history that we don't need to get into.
But it's just such a... You're just opening up a huge can of worms. But when you start Witcher 3 and you want to start learning about all these interpersonal relationships and you want to learn about the lore and it's so intriguing, you just want to keep going into it.
Well, the dialogue and all that extra stuff not only is there told to you in the story what matters, it will, if it's important, they will say it out loud in front of you. But if you just want it for the backstory, it's all in your journals. If someone mentions a character and you haven't seen them yet, their visage will be like kind of fuzzy in your little bestiary of people, which you have one for people too.
Yeah.
And it will update their stories based on your choices throughout the game.
Right.
So... And they will get really long.
Which I feel like is a good part. I just want to start talking about Kira Metz. I mean, I feel like that's such a big part of... I mean, that's the first main quest I did after leaving
the
Vizima.
Baron? I went to the Baron first, I think. I don't know. I did it on camera, so you would know.
Either of them.
You can.
Because that's like...
Oh, right. The Baron leads you to Novigrad, right?
That's your trail from Ciri. You can go to either one, I think.
Oh, in early game, it's probably important to mention, they are kind of gating you off of at least half of the map of Velen by putting up this blockade over a bridge that you need certain paperwork to pass. And you're supposed to get this from the Baron, but there's other ways around it.
There are a lot of ways to... I mean, that's another one of those things.
There's so many ways to solve everything.
Different ways. You could also just jump into the river and try to swim as far as you can.
You can... I think you can swim all the way to Novigrad, yeah.
Yeah, but, you know, it makes sense for a war-torn country dealing with, you know, people trying to take over from Nilfgaard and Redania.
They have refugees. They have people trying to escape.
We're trying to get, you know, paperwork for safe passage, basically.
Yeah, people trying to get in, people trying to get out. It's a mess.
So you meet your Wild Hunt for the first time with the help of Kira Metz, and you fight them there. And... basically, then she gives you a side quest after that.
I think you see them beforehand. Remember, there was this village you run into.
That's later. Well, I didn't run into that village till later.
I think I ran into it earlier.
I ran into it mid-game.
There's a village that was completely ravaged by them, and there's only one survivor. And I think he gives you another
He's too scared to talk to you about it, but he gives you a little...
You can get some information.
Axii, he'll give you a little something.
You can get some information out of it.
So that's why I thought maybe it was later in the game, because you use like an Axii level 3 or something to get him to calm down.
I invested in that first. I had that before I left White Orchard, I think.
So, after that, you ended up going to something called, I think it's called Fyke Isles, after you do Kira Metz's main quest with the Wild Hunt.
Yep.
I find this place absolutely terrifying. I scared myself. Should not have played it when Alex was not home. But it's essentially like a haunted house.
It's the closest you're going to get to it. A haunted, like a watchtower.
It's like a haunted watchtower where you listen to this huge tragic story about how this girl's family was attacked because father was greedily hoarding food from peasants, and they hid up into this tower and a revolt. And
it gets really dark too. How they eventually, the people come in, they attack the daughter.
The daughter ends up taking some kind of medication that will put her into a deep sleep
to look like she was dead.
You also need to know that this tower is a laboratory for a famous sorcerer.
Which is why you're here.
Yeah, which is the main reason why you're here.
Right.
Kira Metz sends you there to look for something from this sorcerer.
And you don't have to do this, by the way. This is not main story.
Totally optional.
You team up with Kira Metz, see the Wild Hunt, main story. She says, oh, by the way, can you help me with this one thing if you got some time later? Bye-bye.
Right.
This is the thing. Bye-bye.
Yeah, but the thing is, she can, her fate is so wildly changed based on what you do in this
Boy,
quest.
the game wants her to die so bad.
And, so the sorcerer gives this potion to the daughter, saying that if you take this, she'll appear to be dead, and then maybe they'll leave you alone. So she takes this when the forces come to try to kill her, and she ended up not being able to move, and the rats ate her body.
Right, it didn't work, and she was eaten alive
and
by
there was like
rats.
a lover involved in this, so eventually
Oh
you do
boy,
go.
that can't end well either.
That does not. So,
But still, there's a lot to it, and you're discovering this, a lot of it by finding notes, or speaking to spirits with a certain lantern that you get from Kira Metz, and you're using this to speak to people who are kind of trapped, living this day out over and over again in their head. And then you'll use it to speak to the spirit of this girl, and you're trying to appease her so that you can get whatever this documentation is that Kira Metz wants
all
out of
in
you so
this
bad.
really spooky tower where things will just move when you're not looking, and there's
You'll hear
swinging
sounds, like,
things, and you'll hear
upstairs, and-
sounds, and you don't want to use your Witcher senses, because then you'll just get freaked out more.
Okay.
I got really freaked out. But another sad part of the story is, so you find out that she's a wraith, but you think
she's kind of
spirit,
lying
she's
to
trapped.
you. Even
Yeah.
spirits are lying to you.
Yeah, she's just kind of lying to you.
She was trying to escape the tower because she was trapped here.
So you end up taking her remains to her boyfriend.
You can. You could choose to do that.
Yeah, I mean, it ends badly.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he ends up dead if you do that.
Yeah, because then she goes
There's
with the
part of the story she
remains.
didn't tell you, like he was cheating on her or something like that, and she...
No, she was mad that he left her there to be eaten by the rats.
Oh, yeah, he
So,
ran away. Yeah.
And
I think as soon as you walk out of the room, you hear screaming, and you have
Right.
to come rushing back in.
Because she tells you the whole sob story of, like, I can't leave this tower, but then there's, like, inconsistencies in her story. She'll talk about going to the edge of the island.
You can
and
pick up
stuff.
on first. And
Right.
the game gives you these chances to listen into people's stories, and not just, she's telling this one in full, just so you get the idea of, like...
How, like, in-depth these stories are.
Well, not just
and
that,
how
but the
you go
game
through all
is
of
giving
them.
you tease little things to help you figure out whether what you're doing is right or not. Because you can totally fall for something
Right.
and do the wrong thing, and you got to live with your decisions. If we're allowed to jump around a bit to another one, if you kind of concluded that.
Well, I just kind of wanted to do that as, like, a base, like, layout. Like, this is how most of the stories are. This is how in-depth they are. I do want to conclude, though, with where everything finishes up, and you eventually get the item that you need from the tower to give to Kira Metz.
Right, and then you have to deal with the dialogue of the game trying to kill her.
This is the hardest dialogue.
Yeah. You have to convince her not to do what she was planning on doing, and safely go to Kaer Morhen for Sanctuary and not go to Radovid, which she doesn't want to do any of that stuff, because she wants to try and exact
She's
this
out
plan
for her own skin,
for her own gain,
she's
so that
just-
she thinks she can convince Radovid that she shouldn't be executed because she's going to give him some
Yeah, but
gain.
here's the thing, Radovid's crazy.
Radovid's nuts, and yeah, and if you fail this, you either have to kill her yourself, or next time you go into Oxenford, I think you will see her burning at the stake on the way in.
Right.
So you don't want that. The game is about
Because
trying to
if she
save
lives
characters.
and goes to Kaer Morhen, she'll help you.
She
in
will
a
help you
fight
later.
later. So
Yeah, a fight you don't really need her in, but she will help you later.
But I'm still like, those are big dialogue options that make a huge difference for you in the end. And
But some things, some parts of the story, there's only one that I have an issue with, where the game does give you clues that you might have messed up, but it's a little too late. One of them actually takes place, I think it is Novigrad, not Oxenford, where there is a murder and an attempted murder involving Priscilla, a character who doesn't really get resolved very well.
Yeah, that does bother me. That's like way later in the game.
It's much later, but I'm just jumping this as an example.
Are you
'cause
sure that's not Oxenford? Because that's where the doctors in the hospital are at, or in Oxenford.
I thought it was Novigrad, but
But
that's where
you see her
Priscilla
sing in-
was.
Yeah, you see her singing Novigrad.
Yeah, she's in Novigrad
so.
at first. So anyway, so you go through this murder mystery, which is, you're a detective anyway. It's effectively what you're doing. And you'll get to a point in this where
Alex
you
did
think...
very poorly with this on the first show.
Yeah, and I'm going to explain briefly where I messed up. So there were notes, warnings, like, littered around Novigrad saying, like, oh, this person's going to strike next, they're doing this, and they're left by the killer. And, of course, there's no fingerprints or anything back then, so you really have very little to go on until you catch someone in the act, and you do.
And you do actually go into an autopsy room at one point to examine the bodies. So
that's another thing. That's a huge part of the game is doing autopsy reviews, basically, and just like examining what happened to this horse that was knocked off the side of the road, or this person. What manner of monster killed them?
Bite marks. Is there fluid left in it? Is it? And Geralt, it'll usually give you the dialogue options that tell you to look at each section of the body, and
then there's a sub tree because you have to learn something. Like you might. Keep investigating, like, oh, is this a bulge in his throat? And it's gross stuff, but you do that and you feel like, oh, there's a sack of money in here. And you're thinking, what does all that mean? And you're running through your head like, what kind of monster is this? Is this anything that I know, or is this new? And
is this a human?
And of course, Geralt knows all this stuff because he's studied it, and he'll, like, reveal what his findings are, either with you or... he will kind of leave it up to your dialogue choices, whether he figured out exactly what it was or not, or you don't want to tell another person nearby what you think it is. There's reasons why you need to be deceptive all the time. But anyway, so in this one, you run into a person who's like a priest of the eternal fire, so of course he's going to be protected by the state. And he's got like a hot iron and is just like torturing this...
the whorehouse he goes to.
Yeah, he's in a whorehouse. He's torturing this poor woman tied to a chair. And you assume this is the guy. You caught him in the act. This is the dude.
Because there were like hot coals and stuff.
Yeah, there was some stuff that didn't add up though, and I remembered this. But the thing is, there was a dialogue option right when you walk in, and it's based on how you respond to him. One of them is gets you into combat, and you don't realize that.
You were so mad at him.
Oh, I was pissed at him. Fuming. I was like, dude, no. So I start chopping the guy up, and apparently, if you do this. Geralt thinks he did it, he solved it, and that's basically all you can do to tell Dandelion, if he wants any comfort, that the person who attacked Priscilla and probably took her voice away from her permanently is gone. They attacked her throat, but she managed to survive.
Right.
And
I think that's the thing, like they pour hot coals down the throat. I think that was part of the MO or something.
Yeah, there was something to it, but still, that's not the person. And Geralt had the ability, Kim did this, to just hold back and listen to him first, you would have found out that this is an unrelated thing. And, well, I mean, it's technically related, but this is not the guy. This is not what was actually causing these problems.
And here's the kicker. You still get to kill him.
Yeah, eventually. Right. But the thing I wanted to talk about this story for was if you screwed this up like I did, you will go back into Novigrad thinking you succeeded. Even if you might be thinking back like, that autopsy doesn't add up with this guy, though. Like, that doesn't fit the MO of the other corpses. The game will start dropping more of those papers in Novigrad, hinting that you did not get the right person, but the quest will never update again.
Yeah,
Geralt, this is one of them where Geralt does not realize, oh, shoot. You'd think he would pick one of them up and he'd go, uh-oh, that ain't good. Like, I just told everybody that I just stopped them, and it wasn't it. And the ending of that is actually really clever of who it is and what was actually happening, and I felt really bummed that I screwed that up on my first playthrough.
Yeah, it was really great.
It's a really cool story.
So basically it's an Ekamara, did you find? I think it's an Ekamara.
Yeah, I guess we're spoiling everything.
I'm going to spoil it. It's not... So when you're doing the
There's so many stories in the game, even if this is your first time through of what we're talking about, there's so much more content in this that you're missing nothing.
And, like,
plus, you'll probably forget by that point.
It's one of the things you're picking up on, too, when you're doing the autopsy is...
it was a beast.
It was this new person during the who was doing
the autopsies. A new person doing the autopsies, yeah, who was trying to get you out of the room.
Yeah, he was trying to get you to not look at things.
And everyone seemed fishy for different reasons. Yeah. Like, one guy came from, like, another school and was kicked out because of certain reasons. Like, he was... I don't know. He did something with some woman, or he was kicked out. There's a reason to distrust everyone involved.
For sure. And...
but yeah, it ends up being kind of roundabout craziness that the guy who was actually working with the autopsy area was an Ekamara, and... or like was a vampire that can transform, and
I'm pretty sure it was an Ekamara.
It was some sort of, he might have been a Catachan, but he was some sort of vampire that would transform, and he would attack at night. and this was his thing. And then he would go clean up his own messes.
Yeah, because he'd be the person.
No one would suspect him.
Doing the autopsy, he would say, "Oh no, it's not this, or this." And but the big thing I think you wanted to talk about was that it feels like Priscilla's story never really wraps up. By
well,
the
it's
end of
that's one of the rare instances where I feel like her story didn't wrap up. But granted, her story in the main story of the game, it didn't involve this at all. This doesn't matter.
Right.
I think you could even play through the rest of this without this murder thing even happening. It doesn't matter.
The female version of Dandelion, I was gonna say one of his many lovers, but this is like the one I think he actually cares about.
Yeah.
So.
Well, to be fair, he stays by her bedside. And he would probably not do that with any other lover of his. He's very flippant.
I feel like there's some big characters we can talk about that are just kind of Geralt's friends that are always. We'd say Dandelion
and Zoltan. Yeah.
You know, Dandelion's a bard. If anyone who doesn't know. You know.
Yeah. He's called Jaskier in the Netflix show because his original name
in Polish,
untranslated, is Jaskier. But I think that's supposed to be like a sunflower or something.
No, it means buttercup.
Buttercup, yeah.
So when they went to translate
his
the
English
books
translation
and,
was Dandelion, which I actually like that name.
I do.
It
like
fits
that
him very well.
Yeah.
Jaskier does not fit him.
Yeah.
I don't think, because it is literally lost in translation. We're missing out something there.
Yeah. I feel like by using the original Polish name, people are just like, oh yeah, I guess that's his name.
Yeah.
But
anyway.
like you said, it means buttercup. And then I guess since they translated the games first, that's when they decided he was going to be Dandelion, and then translated the books, because in the books he is called Dandelion.
The books honor his name as Dandelion, which I think is for the best.
I think it's better, just makes fun of him. So
so one of my favorite instances of the story is when, and this happens all over the game. I'm going to give you one shorter example of this, and I think it actually takes place somewhere in, I'm not sure if it's Tucson. No, it's in the Hearts of Stone DLC. There is an instance where you will come across, just on your journeys, this abandoned manor with this huge fountain out front, and you'll go up to it, and it's spooky. You can hear there's and they change somehow the weather, and you can hear the crows more, and it sounds like there's ghosts and stuff flying around here. You go up near the fountain, and 3 wraiths come out and attack you. You kill the wraiths. This is just a video gamey thing. You expect them to be there. You go in deeper into the manor, and there's nothing inside. I think there might be one stronger wraith that you fight inside, and then you read the notes of someone who was stuck in a cell. And this is how the game does its storytelling out in the greater wild, not tied to quests. It will let you read something, and you'll read about what set up the events that caused the situation that you just stumble across that you just assumed was a video gamey thing.
Loot the bodies first, then read the stories. Because if you read the stories, you're not going to want to loot the bodies, and you're going to feel real bad.
Well, you have to kind of loot the bodies to get this stuff sometimes. But so in this particular instance, this was the story of a noblewoman who had kind of gone mad that she thought her 3 daughters were stealing her beauty from her. And the husband. You're mixing
this up with another story.
No, I'm not. I'm talking about one in Hearts of Stone.
Okay.
I distinctly remember where this is. So the husband is trying to stop her and trying to take care of her because he is kind of picking up on the fact that she has what we would now know as mental illness. Something is actually wrong with her, that she thinks that her daughters would have this capability. And eventually it gets out of control, and she drowns the 3 of her daughters in this fountain in the front, which is why you fought the 3 wraiths there. This is something that you're putting together as you're reading this, figuring out, oh my gosh, and you go back and you can look there are 3 skeletons hanging over the edge of the fountain, and that would have been the place where the wraiths came out.
Right.
The husband, I think it was the husband, he hung himself down there, and the wife he locked away in a dungeon, or beneath their house.
It sounds familiar.
It's tragedy after tragedy, and the thing is, this place, there was no survivors from it, and you just kind of uncover this and take what you can with the purses and things that you can loot and leave, and try not to think about it. And that's what so much of the game is.
So heartbreaking.
You can fly through it, and sure, it would be a lot easier if you didn't read that. because you would have never known. You just would have walked in, oh, hey, there's a ton of money and maybe, I don't know, some emerald powder or something I need for, I don't know, this new concoction I'm making. If I go here, just don't read the notes.
And there's a lot of times that monsters can give you clues about, into your detective work even. If you're going on a quest and you see an Archosaur somewhere, it's actually part that's like blood that's unfairly spilled or something like that.
Some evil crime happened at that point. Yeah,
right.
that's a Witcher 1 thing.
Wraith, and that's the same with the Wraiths. Like someone died here with unfinished business.
You don't turn into a Noon Wraith or a Night Wraith without a good reason.
Right. So, like, those monsters can give you a good inclination on what they are, and that's the same with the Drowners as well, and Water Hags. The only thing
everything is so thought through for the story.
Right, and they have, like, we talked about a different level of monsters, but there's, I forget what the word is, but they're essentially not created like that, like Leshens and Godlings, relics.
Yes, relics. Relics are so weird.
Right.
Relic is like the catch-all term for we don't know what this is. Story-wise, this is another thing really briefly. The conjunction of spheres gets referenced a lot. But this is where all the monsters came from, and I actually think this is really clever. So basically, The Witcher's canon assumes that I think regular human history happens up to like a medieval stage, and then this weird event called the conjunction of spheres happens, which the conjunction of spheres, the aligning of planets, basically. It's basically the planets aligning, and it causes this weird distortion where a bunch of dimensions spill over into each other. And since none of the originators of each of these dimensions realized what was happening, everyone thought, including the monsters, that they were in their original dimension.
Right.
And I'm pretty sure it's the human one. History is the canon one here, because since we know where the Wild Hunt comes from, I think that's where the elves originate. Same for like the dwarves, the monsters. Everything is coming from its own dimension and spilling over into ours.
I just feel
and that's
like
where the game references this a lot. I think that's where it's all coming from.
We could talk about the conjunction of spheres for a while, because there's a lot of hypotheses with it. And the fact is, when you get into the game, the conjunction of spheres happened so long ago.
Oh yeah, nobody knows.
Nobody knows except for maybe
it's
the
lost
crones,
data. And of course, if you listen to the Elvish stories, and you can find characters who are studying this in Elvish, they will tell you something totally different.
Oh yeah, the elves believe this is their land, and you don't mess with them.
Yeah.
And just so you don't get confused when you're playing a game, elves and Scoia'tael are the same thing.
Well, Scoia'tael is bands of non-humans. It just means non-human.
Oh, okay, because from my
it doesn't mean non-human, it means someone who is actively, like, rebelling against
I
humans.
actually just got to this point in the book where they explained the meaning of Scoia'tael means squirrel.
Yeah, yep, they call them squirrels.
They call them squirrels, so...
if you hear someone in the books, or I'm sorry, in the games, calling someone squirrels, they're talking about, it's because they tend to get raided a lot by them, and they steal stuff, you know, they're just like squirrels to them. And they're trying to put them down, too, so squirrels.
Right, but you'll also, as you're exploring the world, you'll find a lot of elven ruins. That's a really big
actually
thing.
Spilled over. There's a lot of like magical artifacts spilled over in this conjunction. It's what formed the world as they know it.
Right, and there's just so much you could there's just so much to hypothesize about it. Like I said.
Oh yeah, I know. It runs deep, and we don't have the time to do that.
And they don't even.
You could make an entire podcast just trying to dive into what is going on in The Witcher. In fact, I've listened to an entire podcast series, which is out there. I would name drop it right now if I knew it offhand, but somebody went through and just read out loud in character as many of the interesting journals and just bits of bestiary entries, just things that you can read in The Witcher, and just turn them into little short snippets of podcasts. It's really interesting. All of it. It's all so great. Because I unfortunately fall into that where I get into a gameplay thing and I'm just like trying to sweep an area and get all the little question marks done.
Oh, yes.
Which, by the way, just you see little question marks on your map doesn't mean that's it. There's plenty of hidden stuff that is not a question mark, and there's a whole quest there.
I've ran past characters on my horse sometimes, so start yelling like, hey Witcher, and if you stop, they're not question marks. I just happen to be in the right place at the right time.
Well, those people could be moving on top of that. There's some of them that are not moving, and they're designed for you to find them.
There's also merchants that are always constantly moving too. They'll go from town to town, you know.
You know, one thing that kind of reminded me, because some of those question marks can give you those medallions humming. One of those things is nearby. I forget what they're called. the places of power. And you can sit down and meditate in front of these things, and you'll get a free ability point for the first time you do it. And it'll charge and make one of your signs stronger for a while, but nobody really cares about that. The ability points are what matter. Every time Geralt levels up, you'll get another ability point, and that's how you'll get those skills to customize how you want him to work. That's how you'll level up your axing and all that stuff. Again. I know, I'm sorry, it's huge. But like stuff like that will never be actually hidden. Those will just be question marks. There's a lot of stuff like you're saying you can uncover, or I'm pretty sure the story I just described about stumbling across the manor with the wraiths, that was not even a question mark. I think this was just me trying to, I think it's somewhere to the north, and I was just exploring everything.
And as you can imagine with the map so big, there's also treasure hunts. You can find notes on people's
to the
dead
detriment
bodies.
Of Skellige.
Yeah.
It's one of the only things I don't like about the game is in Skellige there are so many buried treasure caches that it's just not worth your time.
Well, I'm just kind of talking about even in Velen, there's a lot of places where like
you'll
find a note and this person will say, I left the money here until you can get back, and then you know, the notes on the dead bodies.
It might give you a hint at where they buried something, or where they're going to meet up with someone else, or if it's bandits and you can hunt them down. Yeah, there's so many things you can uncover, but it's all based on like trying to read and discern things for yourself. And if you don't pay attention to what's going on, you're losing the real hook of the game. Then it just becomes, you know, a generic dark fantasy game where, sure, the main story is going to give you...
It's compelling.
Sure, it is. But what really sticks it is all the side stuff, which is what's taking us so long to try and explain it in the story segment.
Which is how full the world is. I mean, people still try to convince me that Breath of the Wild is so full and lively, and I'm like, have you played Witcher 3?
No. So Breath of the Wild's map is huge, but that's it. It's very empty, especially compared to Witcher 3. Witcher 3 is just dense enough where you can go in pretty much any direction and you will stumble across stuff constantly.
Right, and you know, I feel like just comparing it back to Breath of the Wild, you can find like one of three things in Breath of the Wild, whereas in The Witcher, you could be finding a whole new story. You could be finding treasure caches.
It's not like, you know,
haunted
monster base, the horse stable, or a shrine. You know, that's basically all you can find. Or a Korok, whatever.
That's literally all you can find in that game, and it was just the same thing over and over. But those are my thoughts on a totally different game. Just because Witcher ruins games, other games you want to play.
Yeah, I think I might have said that in my review, because I do honestly feel that even to this day. I think Witcher 3 is so good, it actually ruins my expectations for other games. Yeah. So, for example, Tears of the Kingdom. A lot of people were complaining about that. I'm not going to get into it. But people were complaining about it, saying, "Oh, it's just like expensive DLC. It's the same thing." And you know what? I played Witcher 3's DLC. It's better than that. I don't even think Tears of the Kingdom would be acceptable DLC for CD Projekt Red. No, well, old CD Projekt Red. I don't know about it anymore. Hopefully, they're still got the same people there, and they just made some mistakes.
Same ambition, I guess.
Yes. But anyway, so that's that though. Was there anything else?
I would have paid full price for both of the Witcher DLCs.
Oh yeah, if it was its own game. Oh yeah. They're that big. They're that big. It's insulting to the rest of the industry how good it is compared to the kind of stuff that we just tolerate. You know, that other companies will just give us something that's exactly the same, marginally different. Oh, this one's Overwatch 2. Oh, really? Okay. Pay us again now. Oh, and now you have to pay for this extra fee just to even play the game. Oh, and now there's battle passes and there's loot boxes. Oh, shut up with that. Yeah. How about you just make like an actual, like, look at what made the original base content so good. Give me more of that.
Yeah.
That's what Witcher 3 does so well with its DLC.
I guess one of the next story points I just want to talk about is kind of just series storyline throughout the game.
You want to try and blast through this? We didn't even get to like my favorite.
I'm going to try to just go like Baron, Crohn's, Isle of Mists. Okay, let's just hit those three. And get to the end of that.
Sure, the Bloody Baron quest, if you haven't gotten to play that, this actually can end so many different ways. It's nuts. Like, this is something where if you don't have the guides to read up on this, go to YouTube. Because if you try and optimize this, and you're doing everything in your power to save everyone, and still get them on your side, because you're trying to... I don't know how you did, but you did.
On my first try.
And actually, by doing so, I think you kind of hurt yourself because
you thought the story wasn't as strong.
For as awful as it is, I think the story is much more compelling with what
dies.
happened to me. And you can watch my reaction to this on my live, not a live stream series, just my episodes for this. Basically, the Bloody Baron did come into contact with Ciri. This is him telling stories of Ciri, and you actually, while he tells the story, you play as Ciri. It's really cool.
That's one of the main things I wanted to talk about. Like, as you're finding bits of Ciri's story, you're playing those bits, and you're playing as that character. Like, Ciri is a playable character.
You're rescuing this little girl named Gretka, who will eventually go live with the Baron, and you, like, find out, like, what's going on with all these characters.
And, like, then you find out things, like, more about the crones. I feel like the crones are a huge part of this
The crones
game.
being the Hansel and Gretel witches of the woods that I kind of hinted at earlier.
Right. They eat children.
Yeah. They're gross.
That's what Greta was sent for. She was sent into the wilderness.
Gretka was sent there to be eaten because she spilled some milk, I think.
Yeah.
And that was the last their parents had, and Dad was pissed and wanted her to die.
Yep.
And I think
really
Ciri catches on to that really quickly and
takes her somewhere else. She makes sure she doesn't take her back to
and
her
she
parents.
tries to do the same too when she uncovers a body and makes sure that the little girl isn't looking at this mutilated corpse, because you do have to hunt down what she's calling the Wolf King.
Right.
There's monsters and things all through the main story, but I think another one of the strengths, like in this instance here, is trying to juggle multiple things at once. You're not just trying to figure out what happened to this Wolf King, figure out where he is, what is it, how do I prepare for it, kill it. You're also trying to protect this little girl at the same time, and it kind of shows what these characters are all about when these things happen. Like the Bloody Baron. At first, you find him. This guy's a dick. You are designed. He's designed for you to hate him. He's a jerk. But then the more you really stick with him, you realize he's actually a really good guy. He's just kind of like an alcoholic and a brute at points.
Just an abusive alcoholic, which, I mean, you could say anybody in that scenario. I think, you know, his wife and his daughter probably did the right thing.
Right, so story-wise, just to catch you up, his wife and his daughter are gone, and he's kind of holding his information about Ciri hostage from you until you do something for him first, which is to find his wife and daughter. And you will find out eventually that they don't want to be found. They ran away from him because he's an abusive drunk.
Right, yeah.
And he is genuinely sorry and genuinely wants to make things right, and they will not hear it. And it's sad because that's for the best for them, because you never know if he's gonna relapse again. Right. But the thing is, you try to save his wife. Eventually, you'll find out that his wife actually ends up under the influence of these crones in the woods, and she eventually is the target. Once you tell the Baron this, he sets off with his men out into the woods, even though Geralt's like, no, don't mess with them.
But the thing is, like, there's also this other thing that you could completely miss, and I did, and you find his daughter as well, and his daughter and his wife went in totally different directions.
His daughter went really far.
Yeah.
She ended up under the protection of the Knights of the Eternal Fire or something like that.
No, I think it was the Witch Hunters?
Witch Hunters? But I'm not sure. But
I don't remember. It was
she was saying she's, like, found the light of the Eternal Fire, but... Which, by the way, is just Christianity. It's all it is.
Medieval Christianity. So lots of lighting people on fire.
Yes, it's the Dark Inquisition level Christianity. It's bad stuff. But she feels safe with them, which is something understandable considering where she came from.
But so you tell her where her mother is,
and she will join in on this quest too.
Where his wife is,
and they all kind of converge at the same time. And
then you fight this really cool fiend.
Oh my gosh, that fight's great! And the crones are telepathically like speaking to you and projecting as you're in this. And then
you end up talking to the crones, which is another level of character where you're like, they're so old. They're so much older than this world. And this also leads to a whole other story where you do a quest for them in the tree, and you find out that that's their mother. And
how that can either accidentally...
You destroyed a whole village.
Yes, I destroyed a whole village, but I still feel like I did the right thing. I don't know. See, that's some of the best parts.
I love that.
The best parts of these quests, I know we keep going back to this, how many best parts were there? But this particular best part is that you might even look up in a guide later, and let's just forget the raw numbers of how much XP and how much gold you get for either direction. Let's just say you are not that detached from the game, and you just want to figure out morally what's the right thing to do. There are so many of them, like this one that we're implying here, that I don't know. They're both awful. They're both, like, or just all, you have multiple options, and they are equally horrible.
So I feel like what I did, which was the good option, doesn't really resolve, personally.
No.
So, like, in my option, the wife ends up going with the Baron to go get medical treatment somewhere. And
because she loses her ability to speak, or something like that, or...
Right.
I'm not sure. That wasn't my game. What happened in my game was, by the time we get there and we fight our way through, we find her cursed and turned into a water hag.
I don't think it's specific. I think she's like a...
She's a hag of some sort. She's some new sort of cursed monster. And the crones are laughing at you. Geralt goes like, oh, hold on. This is my expertise. I can do this. You go down to the basement. You see like a bunch of potential... links or totems, and you need to find like the right one. The witch hunter is even there trying to help you and talk you through, like, okay, wait, okay, that's her favorite kind of flower, but she always wore this feather, or like, oh, that is something she gave to, and you had to have paid attention. I think it's much earlier in the Baron's quest where he implies like he's planting some flowers in a garden, saying this is her favorite flower.
And I also want to state at this point, the crones who are controlling this whole situation, it is not an option. You do not want to fight them at this point
no, you can't. I don't even think you can. Like, even if you try to, I don't think you can.
You should never end up in a dialogue option where you are fighting them. They're so much stronger than you.
You will come back for them. Geralt gives them a threat that is not an empty threat. And Ciri does it too, because, yeah, she's pissed at them as well. But anyway, you only if you paid attention much earlier that the Baron said, like, this was her favorite flower, where the Baron is not here. He's trying to deal with his wife being a monster. You're in the basement and you're thinking, no. I know what the special unique tie is that the crones would have used to curse her, and this is the thing. It is this flower. You get it, and you're right. And you bring her back, but it's only for a moment. She is brought back completely, no strings attached. She can talk and everything. They do get a moment to try and, like, apologize and try and make things right, and the Baron is so genuinely sad. But the thing is, at the end of it, she dies anyway, and... Or, like, just she can only be brought back temporarily, and she's just succumbed by this, and she dies. The Baron, then, you would never have seen the end of this until you just happened to go back into...
Yeah,
go
and
back
you
to
find out
Crow's Perch.
His second in command. You talk to the people in village. The second in command person is now the head in command.
A new jerk, running the place.
And you're like, what's going on? And
and you walk in, and it's very still and quiet. And the camera does this great thing where it pans around where Geralt sees something off camera,
like a silhouette, really.
And then you basically shoot somewhere else. And the game never knows what time of day it is, so it doesn't do anything with shadows. But it pans to the side, and under this main tree, you see just a pair of boots. And then it'll eventually pan back, and you see that the Baron has hung himself. And that's the end. It's just quiet, no words. You just realize that everything you've done,
into the beautiful abyss in my game. I don't know what you did, you monster.
I did everything right. I tried to save them, and that happened anyway. And it's like, you have to go.
Either option that you choose, the Baron is no longer a character in your game.
Exactly, right. And that's the clever part about this. He's written out of the story intentionally to make sure that the rest of the game doesn't conflict with anything weird.
Right, because even if he goes off and tries to find a medicine man with his wife...
Which Geralt even says this is probably not ever going to work.
Right, and his second in command still takes over at the...
But unfortunately that way, like in your story, you can tell he really meant it when he said, I'm going to change, I'm going to do everything I can to make things right. Because she can't do anything for herself anymore, and he's now dedicated himself, no matter what, to take care of her.
he's taking care of her.
His daughter won't talk to him anymore in your story, so that's not resolved properly. But just by knowing that's what he was going to do, I feel like just makes the story of what happened in mine so much sadder. I was just trying
to talk about Ciri.
Yeah, Ciri was involved. And you got to figure out where Ciri is.
Okay, and then, so with Ciri, and then you talk about the crones. The crones want to eat Ciri to get her power. They essentially, there's another part that you play as Ciri, or it was just a cutscene where the crones have actually kidnapped her.
You play as Ciri.
Yeah.
Because you have to escape again.
You have to escape from the crones again. And this is, at that point, Ciri teleports again to a new area, a new location. So you're back on the trail again.
Takes you to Novigrad, a bustling, amazing city in the north.
And then you start, the conflict of your romance story between Triss and Yen.
Yeah, and of course, Triss is the option.
Oh, yeah, no, definitely Yen. She's way sexier. I don't know where
So anyway, you go to Skellige.
Where a big explosion happens.
What?
You don't remember this?
What? No.
a giant explosion happens, and you're working with the druid there to try to find, and Yennefer is
not
there
like fire
already
explosion, like magic storm, unexplainable explosion happens.
This is like the big thing. You meet Yennefer there.
Again.
We
met her in White Orchard.
You just kind of meet up with her randomly, and you figure out there's this huge explosion, and it involves Ciri, and then Yennefer's trying to use her powers to figure out what happened to Ciri in that location. And then I'm just really trying to speed through Ciri's story here.
You really don't have to get that much farther. Why are you just trying to get to the point where you finally get to her?
Yes.
Okay, we're at the Isle of Mist then, fine.
Okay, so this is on the outskirts of Skellige. This is one of those no turning back points. It'll even tell you when
it's like a haunted isle. Like, if you tried to sail to this point before, there's something with the fog that it will, like, you will come out on the other side or something.
Through it,
yeah, you can't pass through.
You need, it was Ciri's spirit.
You don't know that at the time.
You don't know that's what it is. You have to release this glowing light out and follow it into the mist. So you're going into this place, you find some dwarves that accidentally got trapped here somehow.
And accidentally get killed one after another.
Like 3 of them live, I think, or something like that.
Yeah, some will still live, but and then they will steal your boat to get out.
Understandably, I mean,
Jerks.
They got stuck there and they're terrified. I don't remember, there were like there were some monster fights in there you had to go through. You had to save these
there's
dwarves,
a whole thing.
And
we don't need to get
finally you get to this cutscene where
you finally open the door where these guys have locked themselves in, and Geralt knows that Ciri's in there, but he has to appease these dwarves and find where they are first to get inside. Yeah. That's how the main story goes. It's just one more thing getting in your way. You're trying to appease people.
And then finally...
They just take off, even with your boat, and you open the door.
But
I think as they're leaving, they're saying, by the way, she's
not doing well.
She's not well. She's cold. She's gone.
I think they're giving you that kind of feedback, too, as you're trying to save the others.
And they didn't want to tell you she's dead.
Right.
And the completely unique animations again. And great dynamic camera angle shots and unique music.
And the music.
We haven't even gotten to the music.
Oh,
I'm trying to make sure that I actually separate these by segments.
I'm trying not to cry.
Oh, this is a hard scene. So Geralt finds Ciri.
I know I feel like we've shortened it down, but you were literally like 70 hours in this.
Depending on how distracted you got. But yeah, this has been your entire game. Find Ciri, and this is something kind of important we haven't even mentioned about Ciri. Even though, yes, she kind of belongs technically to Geralt, he really treats her as a daughter, and since Witchers are all sterile, they can't have children. So Ciri's like his... Yes, do you want me to get into that?
No, we don't need to talk. Was that Witcher 2 or is that Witcher 1?
Okay, it's Witcher 2. Well, now you can't just say that. Let me finish my thought and remind me in a moment. Who cares? This is already too long anyway. Who cares? You get to Ciri, and after all this time, she really is his daughter,
like,
his
you're
only
going
family.
Through all this story,
and you go through all this to find her, and she is dead.
Is your daughter. Ciri is your daughter.
And Geralt's like... You gotta remember, Witchers also don't have any emotion, like they can't express these, though there is also hinting that Geralt actually has it, and he's pretending that he doesn't.
We also believe something went wrong with the Trial of the Grasses with Geralt,
yeah.
So that's a whole other,
that's
whole other
thing.
Story of Witcher.
I know, but anyway, so he's like just trying to contain himself and just like cradle her, like she's dead.
He's like emotionally trying to hold her.
Which is something, like I don't know how they acted this, for a guy who is not supposed to have emotions, and there's so much emotion in this scene.
He is trying so hard, you can tell, to just not... He's just kind of cradling her, and then the glowing light comes in.
The glowing light, like, creeps into the room, goes, like, into
that
her...
you've been following through this Isle of Mist, because it's supposed to show you where Ciri is.
And that was all it was supposed to do.
Right.
And it goes into her body... She gasps and comes back to life again.
No, but like the first scene is just you see her hand starting to grip onto his back, and it's like, oh my god. And then it's a wonderful reunion, and it's beautiful, and she talks about all the dimensions she travels to.
She talks about a wonderful city of glass, by the way, which is almost certainly cyberpunk.
Yes, yeah.
She's been everywhere.
She's everywhere.
On her journeys. But anyway, yeah, so you do find Ciri, and if we're gonna...
And this is not the end of the game.
I think this is just like Act 1. Yeah, so then there's like this whole war against Kaer Morhen you have to fend off because now Ciri's there, which is when you need to call on other people.
I didn't even get to talk about one of the huge points before you even find Ciri on Skellige.
Oh, that thing, before I forget, I want to resolve that thing that you mentioned, where Geralt might have children. So...
Right.
So there's this weird quest, I think it was Witcher 2, where you get approached by these two random guys who say they want to do this test on him, and like he wants to volunteer for it. They're just like taking volunteers and they'll pay him for it. You do it, and the quest, spoiler, doesn't actually resolve in Witcher 2 at all. And you don't know what it does. And then in Witcher 3, you will actually find some paperwork, some journals somewhere about these guys. Like one of them died or something, I don't remember. But like you find these papers, and if you read it and you remember their names, you would have put together that these were the guys who approached you in Witcher 2, wanted you to do this test. And apparently the test was to try and bring back the fertility into a Witcher.
I don't even think it's just Witcher, but I think it's the same for sorceress.
Or just sorceresses, whatever. But they're trying to bring back fertility. So it's almost like they were hinting at something that Witcher 4, the protagonist could be the actual biological son of Geralt.
Maybe.
We don't know.
Maybe. And then
anyway,
we didn't even talk about the thing on Skellige where like there's this huge fight for power and you throw the baby in the oven because we mentioned it at the beginning.
Yeah. We don't need to.
Just
but you can
throw the baby in the oven. Just trust the game.
Trust the game.
Throw the baby in the oven.
Mm-hmm. Oh god. Yeah, speaking of our daughter, we'll have to get very soon. We have to speed this up. So story-wise, eventually you get to a culminating of this this fabled coming of the White Frost, which was kind of already dealt with in Witcher 1, but it's dealt with again here because it's a prophecy. It keeps happening all the time. And you have to fend off the Wild Hunt from trying to abduct Ciri.
You know, if you're me, you're fighting Eredin like super drunk. But also, like, you're getting reinforced. Like, Nilfgaard comes with Emir and
everyone's fighting all at once because nobody. If they get Ciri, everyone else loses. So for a moment, they're all on your side.
And we didn't even talk about
a big war.
Killing Radovid and.
Don't need to. The game is enormous. I'm telling you, an entire podcast could be dedicated just to trying to discuss and just examine what this game is.
Maybe that's
and
our
I had to
side
do it
podcast.
In 15 minutes for a playing with myself
maybe that's
episode.
our side podcast. We just talk about Witcher.
Oh my goodness.
Endlessly.
Well, we have 2 other games at least to talk about. If we're gonna try and talk about it some more.
I'll play 2. That's fine.
One and 2. But anyway, so you do eventually save Ciri from the Wild Hunt, slay Eredin, and you have this ending epilogue where you can kind of determine the fate of Ciri in her future. You didn't even
talk about, at that point, you're playing as Geralt trying to follow Ciri, who was who was jumping between dimensions at this time.
Yeah.
So I just feel like that's important because you're like, I'm playing this dark fantasy world, but now I'm jumping through portals and going to completely different dimensions.
You go to like this alien world where there's like other planets in the sky. It was like a barren, dried out ocean. There's these crab monsters coming up from below you.
There's one thing where it's like the forest, the plants are the main inhabitants of this world, and
there's one that's I think the future actually, and not a different place.
Yes,
and it's the White Frost where everything is just frozen over. There's incredibly cold blizzards, and you have to run between the cold.
And so at this point, I forget what happens specifically to trigger this, but Ciri has to do something to either like sacrifice herself to make sure that the White Frost does not happen, because it's still a prophecy whether the Wild Hunt is there or not.
Yeah, and Ciri's whole story is, even though she is the child of prophecy, she is very against this. And she will be so stubborn. She'll be like, no, I'm going to fight against it anyway. I don't care. Even if all the prophesizing, they say this is going to happen no matter what, I'm going to try and fight it anyway. And that's just who she is. And luckily, she comes out alive anyway, even though it looks like she would not have survived.
Yeah, you're thinking, oh my gosh, you know, she's gonna make the sacrifice because she wants to save everybody still, and she wants to end this prophecy. And then you cut.
And luckily, after clearing the game, it's not like you have to go back to a previous save or anything. You can just go straight to
where you are.
Hearts of Stone. You can go to Blood and Wine. Hearts of Stone takes place on the same map because it is so huge. There are whole areas that they just didn't even...
Yeah, we gotta talk about that. We gotta talk about each of these DLCs in the story.
At least briefly.
I can't not talk about it.
Okay.
But you get to this end part and you're like, man, Ciri probably died.
Oh, you gotta get back to this, huh?
Cut. So you're at the Tavern in White Orchard, I think is where you come back in. And you're going to go talk
yes,
to...
it begins and ends in White Orchard. I believe the quest is something ends, something begins.
Yeah, so you go talk to the blacksmith that's at the local garrison that was there, and he has made a personalized sword.
If he's alive. I think he can die.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. But
yeah.
That's just like memorializing Ciri, and it says something very specific to Swallow, which is her...
Implying that she's dead. This whole time, the game is teasing you into thinking that she's dead.
It seems like, Geralt's making this sword just to remember her, and you go back to the tavern in White Orchard, and you...
She might be there. She might be elsewhere. It depends on what you had done up to this point.
Okay, well, so you give her the sword, and you find out that she's alive.
I think what you did was the better ending. This is one where what I did in mine, I didn't like.
Yeah, my ending, I guess I didn't even think about that. The ending where I'm talking about, you basically you let Ciri kind of decide her path, and you inform her before she goes into the void, I think it was.
She becomes a Witcher, basically. Long story short, she becomes a Witcher.
In my game, yeah, she becomes a Witcher.
In mine, I thought what the right thing to do would be is to tell Ciri, to let her make her own decision, that Amir is looking for her and you were tasked with finding her, but of course that's not why you went and found her anyway, but just to let her know that's why. And she will then go to Amir.
Right. I think that
and become the Empress of Nilfgaard.
I think that is the very first cut that you go into, is you are at the castle in Vizima again, and you're talking with Emir, and I tell him that she is dead. I think. Yeah. And you can lie. To there's him. Like 3 different options. You can lie to him. I don't know what you told him then. To let her make that decision. I don't remember it. I don't want to think about it because I don't like it anymore. The more I learned after that point about the story and the characters, I know. Because at first you told me, like, well, that's the better option because she can make the most impact.
Right. That's what I thought. And also, I was okay with it because, like, she got to make her own decision. I didn't want to determine that for her.
Yeah, I hid that from her.
These are real characters. Yeah, you have to hide it from her for her to have that story ending up as a Witcher, but... Regardless, we gotta move on. We have no time here.
So then series technically kind of written out a story at that point, and then you
can show up in Blood and Wine. But that's it.
She can show up in Blood and Wine, so you continue on to Hearts of Stone. So
We'll
Hearts of Stone come first.
Very briefly. We'll do Hearts of Stone.
So you basically you go and you fight a giant frog in the sewer, and then you find out that was a prince, and then you get arrested, and then you're sent on a boat, and you're trying to be shipped away, and then you have to make a deal with the devil essentially to get off of this boat. Who you figure out was actually in the very first tavern.
The very first NPC you talk to who gives you a clue to where Yennefer is in the White Orchard is basically this incarnation of evil himself. Right. So, and he comes back as the main antagonist of Hearts of Stone.
I'm trying to go so quickly with
I know. And manipulating Olgierd was his name?
Olgierd? Oh my gosh. At first you're like, Olgierd is such a terrible person.
One of those, he's a barren character who's like an absolute jerk at first, and you realize why he's like this and what has happened to his family, which takes you into this amazing painted world.
I love his wife as a character. I absolutely love her.
A lot of cosplays
There's
of her.
There's a lot of cosplays of her, yes. Basically, there's this... So, Olgierd is immortal, is what you find out.
Yep.
And...
because of his dealings with this character, who we should just say, Gauntaro Dim.
Gauntaro Dim. And so Gauntaro Dim doesn't want him to be around anymore. So
no, yeah, well, because he's the typical you get your 3 genie wishes and then I get your soul or something like that.
Right.
And one of Olgierd's wishes was for immortality, and now he's like refusing to finish his contract.
Wishes.
So you kind of get saved by Gauntaro Dim from this boat that really should have killed you, and he says, well, for your payment, how about you just get this one guy to meet me? So that's kind of what gets you mixed up into this whole mess.
And then you get the 3 wishes because Olgierd has already laid out his 3 wishes at some point, and they're supposed to be impossible, which is the thing.
You have to appease his 3 wishes, and they're all supposed to be impossible. Right. I love all 3 of the stories. We don't have time to dig into them, but
we do not. But
it's a whole thing. Like this Hearts of Stone, even taking place on the same map, this story is gargantuan, and it's very much worth it.
And then eventually you end up going to his old manor that he lived at with his wife, and I just got to talk about this. There's 2 little demons that live there on the property, a black cat and a black dog.
And a terrifying guy with a shovel.
With skin sewn over his face. Shovel is awesome.
That shovel is a great weapon.
Health and it makes a nice thong sound every time you hit somebody with it. But that's not an easy fight.
No, it's one of the hardest in the game.
That his wife has deceased there, and she's become a specter. And
in the painting,
I think she is a wraith.
She was a
at one point.
She was a painter.
I think you cure her of being the wraith or something like that, and you appease her. And she's awesome. I love her whole character.
That story is particularly tragic too, because I believe the intentionally fruitless and impossible mission he sends you on for this one is to bring back the flower he originally gave her, which of course is long rotted and wilted and is gone.
Specifically a blue rose is what he
wants that particular one. And yeah, they don't grow anywhere. So you actually have to go into this painting, which in this mystical, unreal place, she is still holding on to it, and you either have to convince her to give it up and you can take it back to him, the real one, or you can say no, she can keep it because it's so important to her. It's the last thing she has of her husband before he turned into this immortal monster.
When you're coming to this decision about the flower, the dog and cat ask you if they can be released from their binds or something like that, and you're like, I don't know what the result of that is.
They're demons. Yeah, don't do that. But anyway, the other option, Geralt will still manage to go back there with the flower. He will leave.
I love.
Yeah, he will leave the painting and actually cut that part of the painting out and take that to
where she is standing,
where she's standing there.
She is physically
she moves to that point at the front of the painting.
So
and you can bring her back to
that brought me to tears. Like, he was like confused, like, why did you just bring me this painting?
Why you brought me a piece of cloth? I asked for a flower.
But at the same time, you're like, no, I brought
you actually brought her
life.
back.
And oh my god, and the fight with Gontra O'Dim, it's not like a physical like.
When you finally bring Olgierd to Gontra O'Dim, you eventually will try to solve both parties. You can just let him go, or you can try to fight him.
But you're not like
it's not
like
a combat fight.
It's not a combat fight.
I traditionally hate puzzle fights, but this one there's no other way to do it. You can't have this guy combat you. So instead, if you had actually been paying attention, this guy's name was Master Mirror, or like one of his. He has many names through history because he's another immortal, pure evil.
Oh my gosh, we didn't even talk about like if you hear children singing a specific song, he is nearby.
He's nearby because he's possessing the children to sing it.
Yes.
Yeah. There's so many. Oh, there's a
Push
wonderful.
A spoon through your eyeball.
Yeah, there's a creep. I was thinking of that. There's a creepy scene where you have to meet up with him in a bar, and he got frustrated with somebody, so he just like snaps his fingers, pauses time. But allowing Geralt to transfer with time with him, walks up to this guy and just like pushes a wooden spoon into his eye. It causes all sorts of other havoc, and then of course when he unfreezes time,
nobody knows what happened.
And this guy. He's just demonstrating to Geralt how overwhelmingly powerful he is.
So you can actually defeat him.
You can.
You
have to outwit him. Basically, he gives you a riddle.
Also, this is where you find the Viper set.
Yes. Oh well, the Viper sword. This is where you get the Viper sword.
The set you had to win in
an auction.
No, Gwyn.
It was an auction.
It was auction?
It was an auction.
I thought it was winning Gwyn against somebody, and then she gives you the armor because she was like Vesemir's lover or something like that.
Yeah. Oh! You have to pay her for the scroll, the scroll that takes you.
Gibberish. To
I know, but it takes you somewhere. But anyway, so yeah, that takes you somewhere else. But the main fight with him is really just trying to solve it, and you learn early on that the answer to his riddle is a mirror.
Right.
So you're trying all over the place to get to mirrors, and there's lots of mirrors here. But the problem is he will shatter them when you get up to him, which kind of confirms the mirror is the answer, but you're being timed. And you have to keep running and rushing and trying to figure out what to do.
So you need to drag him out of a mirror.
Yes.
So that's why he is shattering them and moving somewhere else.
And so the only way to outwit that is to make your own mirror by making a reflective surface, blasting open like a hole in the wall where you found like a bunch of like water trickling through, make a pond where his reflection appears, you yank him out of it. It's great.
So good.
But of course you can't kill him, you really just outwitted him and won.
This is just DLC, and it comes with a whole slew of other side quests as well. So
oh yeah, a ton.
It's not just this main story.
And I love that story.
We move on to the magical fairyland of Toussaint.
Blood and Wine is a whole new map. And it's huge. It's bigger than... It's somewhere between White Orchard and Velen.
Now, I've heard some feedback. People don't like Tucson as much because it's so froofy and fairy tale.
Well, it's the contrast that I think is intentional.
I love it. I love it because you're looking at, like, this this is actually a very rich area,
Mm-hmm.
but it's still
Wealthy.
got its dark and grungy things, and it's still got, that
Everyone's
conflict.
very uppity. My orchard's under attack by a spriggan.
So you get an orchard just by accepting the quest.
You do, yeah.
You get an orchard.
A vineyard.
Vineyard, I'm sorry. You get a vineyard just by accepting quests from
Well, that's your payment when you come into this place. You were summoned here.
To find a murderer.
Yes, and it ends up being way scarier than
And
what
way
they...
more complicated than that.
So this is the higher vampire that we were referencing earlier. And a higher vampire is almost divinity level of, like, overwhelmingly powerful.
Right.
Even in their story, only a higher vampire can actually kill another higher vampire.
Right, and there is a level of vampire above higher vampires.
So Geralt, very long story short, realizes what's going on, tries to explain to the very stubborn Empress that this thing is... Duchess, I'm sorry. That this thing can't be killed or driven away. You might even have to just move. This is so, like, ancient and beyond us.
Like,
we can't do this.
Demanding you tell her what it is, because she is
right. She's like, I have
it.
many forces. You don't know how strong my forces are. And of course, her captain of the guard is a complete buffoon too. Like, we've killed many Katakan and Bruxa. We know what this is.
Well, then why
Geralt's
was there one in my
man.
vineyard?
You have no idea. Well, there's vampires all over this place.
In this land,
blood and wine.
There's new monsters. There's peacocks. There's panthers.
That's just the little stuff. It's a whole new map.
You get all new monsters.
Everything.
You get new food. You get a new Gwent set.
One of the best parts about this, though, I know you can go on with that forever, but the main story of Blood and Wine, which of course you had to have played pretty much all of the main story to get to this point because it's late game. It will split at a certain point in the story where you can choose to either pursue trying to hunt down and deal with the higher vampire or basically an elder of the vampires.
You have to draw out the higher vampire. So that's the hard part.
The elder.
He's gone in... No, I'm saying the higher vampire
that's the main story. You need to draw him out.
Gone into hiding.
And you need to choose, do I have to go find basically his lover and draw her out, and she is somehow hidden herself away inside of a fairy tale book, quite literally, which is its own other map.
That's fun.
Or you go and try to bring out the unseen elder, which is above the higher vampire, who can draw him out forcefully.
And luckily, you have your higher vampire friend with you this whole time.
Who will go with you to the end, because that's what he's telling you. Do not do the other vampire thing. And honestly, for the main story, I think it's much better if you go try and find his lover, go into that fairy tale story.
Now,
where
you do learn about, if you go the other route, you find out about another higher vampire that's living in the area who is using an orphanage to feed herself, but she gives them clothes and she houses them. It's a very
she
is
feeds,
it wrong?
feeds
is
from
it
them.
right?
She keeps them alive and takes care of them so she can feed from them because she loves the flavor of children's blood.
Yeah, but the children seem happy, like they're okay with it.
And the singing that you would get when you turn on your game from Blood and Wine on the main menu, which is different from the big booming thing. Da, da, da. Yeah, it's different from that. That is the Blood and Wine music is actually her singing.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of very important, big, cool stuff, but I think you got the gist. The story's huge.
At one point, the whole skies darken and vampires flood the city.
Oh my
gosh,
gosh,
this is when
that
you're
is
trying
so
to decide,
cool.
what do I do? Do I look for the unseen elder or do I look for his lover?
Right, but first you have to try and help protect the city because this place is being... So there was another threat by this vampire saying, I will rain hell on this place if you don't give her back to me.
Right.
Because it's all misunderstandings on either side. I don't want to get into it now. But yeah, you're running through this place that was this fairy tale wonderland, and now it is overrun by vampires flying in the sky above you. Some huge ones just...
opposite
it is
of what you were
chaos.
before. And, by this point, you do know that his lover is the Duchess's sister.
Yes.
So that is also another big contention point.
Yeah, and it will affect your ending.
Affects the ending. There's also a very silly side quest I'd like to talk about in the Blood and Wine, but there's a lot of very silly side quests.
Where you get so high on some sort of drug
oh
or
my
something.
God, I
Roach,
wasn't even thinking about that.
And Roach
one.
starts talking to you, and oh god, look it up if you didn't get a chance to see that. This is an unmarked quest, by the way. There is no question mark, and you get to this hilarious quest where Roach, your horse, starts talking to you, and
you were just high as hell.
it's so funny. It's so funny.
And then there's Geralt goes to the bank because he was declared legally dead and he can't get his money back. And
oh my god, it's so funny.
It's like going to a real bank.
It really is.
So
it's
funny.
hysterical. So this game is very funny
and
too.
Then there's this...
We haven't said that. Like Geralt, even in his writing, is just very funny.
Just funny, and the way that he talks, he's very sarcastic with people.
It's the no emotion, but saying something in your face, very sarcastic. Like, I wonder what this guy would have been like before the Trial of the Grasses.
Right.
Like, he would have been... He's such a jerk.
But it's so hard to tell.
He's a funny, lovable jerk.
The Trial of the Grasses when he's 10, I think.
Right. Who do you have grown into is what I meant.
Right. And I was thinking of the other quest where there's this painter who is like, oh, you're a witcher. I want to paint you.
Gosh. Oh, boy. Yeah, and I missed this on my first run. Yeah, you can... So, for the record, I also didn't play any of the DLC on my episodes because they were so involved to make. So, but still, yeah, I have played that both as well. I finished it on PC and then I finished it on PS4.
We didn't even finish. Well, we didn't finish the story, but we also didn't talk
of the painter thing.
Let's.
If you want a nude painting of Geralt and choose how to pose him.
Well, it led me to my thing about your vineyard and how customizable it is and everything you can do in your vineyard.
Sure. It's a money sink.
Yeah, for sure. But
which
it's
you
a
need
lot
at
of
that
fun.
point in the game. It's a lot of fun, but it's a money sink.
I have the painting of Ciri that Amir has where she's so angry.
There's a great meme with that where Ciri's standing in front pointing at it like grumpy, like,
who did this?
And Geralt and Yen are pointing at each other in the background.
It's great. I've seen that. I love that.
Yeah.
Because they both... I mean, like, Triss is also, like, kind of a motherly figure for her, but I think more of, like, an aunt, and Yennefer's more like her mom.
Yeah.
And Geralt's more like her dad, you know? In
the books, that seems to be the case, yeah. Even though I think Triss is the better fit for Geralt romantically.
So...
Whatever. That's another thing.
I just like Yennefer better.
I like her character, but I also think that story is better if it is flawed and ends.
We are so off topic.
I know, but there is an actual chance for you to end their relationship and like basically kill a djinn to undo the romantic tie of fate that brought them together. And I think that is it's kind of like the Baron quest. I think it's better as a tragedy. It means more to me as a tragedy than it does as lovey-dovey, everything works out, because that's not how things work in The Witcher.
Triss is like too young for him in my head. I think that's where it's at, because she's a very young sorceress versus Yennefer's like 100 and something.
Yeah, she is, but thing is, Triss is gonna look like that in 100 years too. It's all the same. But, age means nothing in The Witcher. I
don't know. They just seem like maturity is a little bit different.
But play the other games.
Back to the Night of 1,000 Fangs, I think is something it's called. So we were talking about vampires coming and taking over the whole city, and you have to fight this main higher vampire, and you're like, oh my gosh, how do I do this?
It all eventually culminates, and yes, you one way or another, you have summoned him to this place to try and talk some sense into him is really all you're trying to do. Oh my gosh, the fight's so cool.
This fight. It is so cool.
It shows every little bit that this is the character who is, if you have any gods, start praying now, who will dominate the entire arena and start getting into your head, making you see things. You have to start attacking like certain things in the environment to damage him.
Is just,
it's so dynamic.
Flows, and it's very dynamic, and thank goodness you do not have to fight the Unseen Elder, because you would lose.
Well, you do fight it. Okay, so technically you don't actually fight it in combat. You do kind of get into a fight with it in dialogue, in an actual cutscene, which can go very badly for you, but yeah, technically no. Basically, it realizes you've entered its domain. It kicks your teeth in, and you kind of wake up like somehow alive in the back of this cave somewhere.
Regis is like somehow resuscitated you and convinced him.
I don't even think
to not kill you. I didn't think it was an actual fight. I thought it was just a cutscene.
It's mostly a cutscene.
Okay.
Yeah.
So maybe that's
anyway.
Where my confusion was.
Doesn't matter. So luckily Regis is with you with this final fight with the actual higher vampire.
Regis is a sweetheart, and you didn't even get into the conflict of why this is hard for Regis.
Yeah.
The higher vampire that you were fighting literally brought Regis back to life from a drop of blood. So like he feels indebted to him. He also
it's a good friend of his too.
Yeah.
He doesn't want to do this, and he's also doing everything in his power to try and talk some sense into him and say like, we need to make this work. I know that you're very upset because of this thing that happened, but regardless, even if you go through all the... Now here, Another very important thing, that if you went into this fairy tale world to try and bring the sister of the Duchess out of here, which is the lover of the vampire, if you go through this a completely optional side thing in there, you can get this ribbon. And if you get this particular ribbon, she will tie it into her hair, and that will actually save her life later in this fight, which is very important, because otherwise he will be completely
And you can't, she
nuts.
will die.
She will die.
Can die.
Mm-hmm. The game is very much
There's
setting
so
it up
many
for her to
different
die.
options that could happen. I mean, we're not even to the point with all the other options. So you eventually kill the higher vampire.
Mm-hmm.
Regis is almost dead. You're almost dead. He goes to live in the graveyard for a bit
Yeah,
to
he goes
recover.
back to his graveyard. Not from a drop of blood this time, though.
No, he's got a full body this time at least.
Well, I mean, his friend's gone.
Yeah, I mean, that's a lot for him to deal with. But Geralt's also a very good friend of Regis, so I think...
Yeah, they'll at least... and oh my gosh, the very, very end, because Blood and Wine, as we mentioned, is the end of the story. It's the end of the DLC.
The complete end of
and the game is really designed to stop here. And there's this wonderful bit, if we're allowed to talk about the end of this now.
Well, we're not even to that point yet.
How are we not?
Because we need to talk about the split off of what can happen between the Duchess and her sister. So you've got 3 different options. Either the sister has died at this point, the Duchess is very mad at you.
Yeah.
The sister has lived.
I don't really want to spoil all of these.
And I gotta tell it, because the one that you did on your PlayStation was awful, and you need to redo it.
I did it twice. Because I mentioned this before. In order to do all of the quests, you have to have multiple saves so that you can go in different paths. If you do the Unseen Elder path, you can't do all the fantasy world, the storybook ones. Because
Which can
you didn't,
never end in a good scenario if you do the Unseen Elder one.
No, if you chose that one, you chose the bad
Poorly.
ending. Which the game has kind of told you at that point, like, we shouldn't do this. And yeah, if you go the other way, like I mentioned, with the ribbon, you can save her life, which you couldn't have gotten on the Unseen Elder
Right.
path.
So, but 2 things can happen if you save her life now.
Yes.
So these are big drastic changes. Either you've done the fairy tale ending and you've gotten her to understand her sister, the Duchess, and they've reconciled and they're kind of happier now and people don't hate her as much. Because she's wanted to murder the Duchess this entire time for stealing everything that she owns.
It's kind of a long story again. She was kind of ousted from the Empire.
Yeah, exactly. And then the other option is, you know, the Duchess is trying to do everything in her power to reconcile with her sister. She still loves her, and her sister doesn't understand that because they were just kids when she was ousted.
She was taken away. They didn't fully understand, and she has grown as an empress and just wants to make do. She's so happy to have her sister back, and she's trying to welcome her back in, but of course her sister has all this malicious intent and is hiding a dagger.
She drops the dagger. That's not actually what she stabs her
she drops
with.
the dagger and pulls out like her hairpin as a backup.
She pulls out the Duchess's hairpin and stabs her through the chest.
Kills her.
And kills her.
And then of course, she is killed by the guards. Immediately. The end.
Oh, that is the worst ending.
That is...
That is just...
But that's a very
terrible.
Witcher ending.
But, like, yeah, when you got that ending, now Toussaint's, like, all gray.
Yeah,
and,
it
like,
is. It's such a sad place.
Yeah, because everybody's in mourning for the Duchess, because her people really loved her.
Yes.
Like, they really loved their Duchess. This isn't an Emir situation where I don't think any of his subordinates like him.
Yeah, well...
And the sorceresses that work with him want to just take him out at some point. I fully believe that Fringilla
But they
will
also
kill him
know...
at some point.
Yeah, but most of those people know they're on the winning side.
Yeah,
so that's kind of why they're fine with it,
That's very
no
true.
matter what. However, ending, actual thing. You basically sit down with Regis after whatever has happened has happened. And the best part about this, Regis will actually start asking Geralt questions. Of course, just asking, like, well, what are you going to do from here? As they're, just drinking buddies by a fire at night. And the questions are cleverly written because we don't know what's happening after this point in terms of the story or in terms of new games. And it's a very meta scene. And in the end, Geralt says something along the lines of, like, he's just gonna, like, let happen, whatever goes is fine.
We've had, like, a great time together.
Yeah, this has been great.
Thing.
If this is the end, I'm okay with it.
Right.
And it ends with him looking, towards the fourth wall and adding, like, a little smirk, just confirming That this is all like we
all
know what we're saying, and we know how much work has gone into this, and that's kind of what they were really talking about.
You're also just like, oh, poor Geralt's tired. He deserves to live in a vineyard the rest of his life.
Oh yes, especially after 1 and 2 and the books. Give this guy a rest.
Right,
he deserves
it. He does not need to be Witcher 4. He does not. It's fine.
No, I'm actually glad he's not the protagonist of Witcher 4.
And
this is a perfect end for him.
We didn't even talk about on your vineyard, you know, everything's customizable. You can put your armor on display.
And it honors who you are in a relationship with. Either Yen, Triss, who will come to live with you, or if neither, it will be either Dandelion or Ciri.
Right. And I had to go look this up. What happens if you get into a relationship with Yen and Triss?
Yeah.
Geralt gets his butt handed
They find out. It's a funny scene. Yeah.
Because you also have to keep in mind, Yennefer and Triss were really good friends.
Right.
So then Geralt happened.
Yeah. Anyway, can we say that was the story, for crying out loud? You know, it's funny, Shay wanted to come onto these episodes and say, I'm going to bring some more structure into Hitbox and make sure that we stay on track and make sure that things don't go out of control.
That doesn't mean that there wasn't an entire, 5 novels to talk about
here. Oh yeah, let's get into Witcher 3: The Wild Hunt Round 2, which in and of itself is going to be enormous.
This is going to be, okay, I'm telling you, I still want to do a Xeno hitbox, and that's going to be just as involved.
Yeah, I had an idea for that too, how to do it, but we don't have time to go into side tangents anymore, so music
section!
Yeah, okay.
It's really good.
I love it.
I love it. I will play the orchestra a lot of the times, and also the singers they get for the orchestra seem like they really love their job, so...
Oh yeah, it's really great stuff. In the DLC, all of it. I really love all of it. The vocals too. There's even one song that's not even in the soundtracks, like the Wolf and Storm, I think it's called. Priscilla sings it when you first meet her in Novigrad, and it's a great song.
But yeah, I looked up. I can't pronounce his name. It's Polish. I looked up the artist who made the music at one point.
He's like
the
16
guy
or something.
is our age.
Well, he started in his teens, I think.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah, he started he was 18, maybe 20, on the first Witcher game, and stayed with them through the whole thing. And I'm like, how do you accomplish that through your life? And we're not even talking about the vocal, the audio, everything with it.
The fact that, here's another thing, every line in this enormous game of all of these branching paths is voice acted. Everything. I don't understand how, why don't we have any other video games that have, standards this high of their quality?
And it's not just, in Polish and English. It's in French. I think it's in Spanish. And they're all fully voice acted, and it took them 5 years to do the voice acting.
I think it was 3. I don't remember, but it was a long time just to do voices. The game was amazing. Done, and they were just doing voices.
Give Game Freak so much crap for not voice acting anything.
Yeah, Game Freak is. Let's not. We're talking about good game companies here. Well, we don't know what's going on with CD Projekt Red.
Yeah, some weird things are happening. I'm really sad. Still really sad about what happened to Monster Slayer. That I was thinking about it again today.
It's the same problems, I think, of internal problems with money.
Right.
But anyway, we can move on to selling this. I don't think we need to dwell on music any longer. The soundtrack is outstanding.
Music's great. Listen to the
all
soundtrack.
of it. The sound effects are great. The dialogue is all great. However, there's actually some rare problems that'll drive me insane, kind of with music. It's when this game does hiccup, graphically or just in terms of a glitch, it will drive me nuts because it will take you out of the game. But there's an instance that will happen sometimes in I think it happened both in my playthroughs where you're talking to Triss or something and she was just in combat throwing fireballs.
Oh my gosh.
And her hand will keep burning in dialogue and it's not supposed to be, and it's loud.
Mine was with Yennefer when it happened, when you're turning Avalog back into a human again, and it's a long cutscene.
Yeah, and it will happen, you're like, I'm trying to listen to what you're saying, but there's this loud crackling in the background because your hand's on fire, and it's not supposed to be.
And I actually have a picture of this isn't sound related, but I have a picture of a character who I was talking to as a book going straight through her head.
Yeah.
So, I would assume with all the updates that keeps happening, Witcher 3 keeps getting
there's a scene
patches, and they keep trying to fix it.
There was a huge one we just mentioned. There is a romance scene you can have with Kira Metz where she can pick up a book at one point, and in my game, I don't think it was I don't know, it might have been the one that I did on camera. I think it wasn't.
Oh, no, because I think you had to go back and re-record it or something
I don't remember.
Something weird happened.
But anyway, she is like rolling around with Geralt after this point, but she had picked up yeah, whatever. But she picks up a book, right? And for some reason, the book will not like detach from her hand in the rest of the scene. So she's like talking, and there's this book stuck to her hand. And then like she goes to the romance scene. There's this book rolling around with him. I'm like, oh my god.
Anytime something like that happened, I took a picture of it because it's just wonderful.
So the game will have like problems like that, but rarely is it problematic. I've had one that was really bad where like you start a race and for some reason Geralt just clips through the floor and like I just fall forever and then like I lose the race. And I'm like, oh, come on! I put money down on that. Like if I got in first, I would have finished this side quest. I would have done this thing, and of course, save frequently.
But I mean, I feel like we can't like justifiably talk to it because we don't know what the recent patches have done. We don't know if these glitches are still happening.
Sure, yeah. Also, there is so many factors and things that the bigger your game is, the more opportunities for it to fail.
Right.
It's just this larger thing that I don't know how
it's a living, breathing world, and it's getting glitchy sometimes.
Any little stupid thing, like you would never think like, oh, that book that she picks up might get stuck to her hand.
Right. And
because one little thing doesn't like trigger in order and the whole thing breaks.
Right.
Programming is very hard.
Yeah, you fix one thing, you've broken another. It's not.
So music-wise, that's like the only time when I feel like the music is not at its best.
When you're having an audio problem, is when you've had that glitch. So I don't even really count that towards the game.
I love all the voice actors. Yeah. I think everyone does a great job. There's like nobody who I feel like does a bad job.
And the voice actor for Geralt, he like trolls people at conventions and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, he's great. He loves to be his character.
I heard that he was dealing with cancer though.
Yeah, he is currently battling prostate cancer, I believe. So. But he did tell us at least over Twitter, for whatever that's worth, that
he said not to worry.
Yeah, he's very confident. His doctors are telling him he's feeling like he's going to be all right. So I hope the best for him. That's not something
that's going to be so hard on your family, and being a voice actor, you don't make a lot of money.
No, that poor guy. I'm sure he doesn't make much, but he's
very devoted to
Geralt, a very beloved voiced character. It's like I bring this up occasionally. Whenever we lose Charles Martinet, the world will just be like Tucson. It will be dark that day. The whole world will feel the death of Mario. Yeah. But same for Geralt. Like I'm scared for when we get older and we see these people eventually go. People are human.
A nice thing about the Witcher games is any reoccurring characters, it's the same voice actors every time, and you can tell between 1 and 3 they've grown and they've learned more about their character and they've gotten better.
They've done voice acting training and they've like gone to school for this. That they're no longer like Witcher 1 just reading their line and Witcher 1 happened. So can we finally try and sell it?
Okay, I think we sold it.
Did we?
Play it. Just
play it. Yeah.
Ruin all other games for yourself.
If anything, don't play it because this game is so good. You will now have such high standards for other video games that they will not reach.
But, it's really strange because I still can't understand how Zach does not like this game.
Maybe he should have been on for this one, but he didn't finish the game. So, when I do round 2 is I want to talk with another person who has finished it.
Yeah, and it's, I guess maybe aesthetically, if that's not your
That's true.
thing.
There's aesthetics that could be the reason why you might not like it, but also, as I mentioned before, you're not going to get nearly as much out of this game if you're not reading and getting invested in every little thing that you do.
Right.
The game is enormous. Take your time. That's one thing I would highly recommend. Don't look at guides. Commit to what you do. You are Geralt. Live in the world. Become immersed, and it will be so much more impactful.
Yeah, you'll play 12 hours and not even know it.
Right. When you find Ciri, it will make you cry because of how much effort you put into trying to find her, and not because it was the next thing you had to do. Yeah. That's what the game does. It makes you invested and makes you care about people, even if they're awful, even if they're an Olgierd or a Bloody Baron.
Yeah, but at some point you kind of sympathize with those characters, and you learn why they're acting the way that they are, but that still doesn't make them a good person in the end.
Right.
So that's how I feel about the Baron. I'm like, you're a dick. And then I got to the end of it, and I'm like, you're still a dick, but I feel a little bad for you now.
A little bad? I don't know how long it took me to say something after I had gotten to the point where I had just seen him hung himself. I was so beaten up. Luckily, it was the end of an episode. It like wrapped up perfectly.
You
Episode
were just staring
time-wise,
at
I was
the
like,
screen.
I need to turn this off. Goodbye. I can't. That hurt me.
It's hard. It's hard.
I just wish other games were even half as good as Witcher 3.
And took the time and the effort into doing it. And, I feel like with that game, we never needed DLC for it. That would have been fine.
No, we didn't need it.
It's kind of a weird thing with games now. We've probably talked
financially,
about this in HITBOX.
they kind of need it to keep going because the games cost way more to develop anymore.
I guess that's true, but like every game has DLC now, and
Yeah.
I'm just like, dude, does every game need a DLC?
No.
I'm so grateful Witcher 3 did because I am absolutely in love with DLC, but the whole DLC, I would have paid $60 again to play that game.
Oh, yeah.
It could have been a whole other game, but we spent like $2 on them.
Probably, yeah.
So it didn't even need to be
And it comes bundled with the
anything.
complete edition of the game if you're buying it on console, by the way.
Yep.
All of the DLC. And there's other DLC outside of just Blood and Wine Hearts of Stone. There's some that are like unique quests and
unique outfits.
Outfits. Yeah, there's lots of
That's fun.
stuff.
You can put it's Ciri, Yennefer, and Triss. You can put them all in.
And their original outfits.
Not quite.
Well, okay, yeah, sort of. So Triss has an outfit inspired by her first game. And the other characters
She
will have
looks
outfits.
like a crack whore in that first game.
Well, everyone kind of looks like they're on drugs in the first game. Come on. Look at when that game came out. Give it a break. So
I mean, I didn't even have a PC that could have ran it, so I'll just give it that. What'd I say, 2007?
I'm still a defender of Witcher 1. I don't think it's a bad game.
I think the story is probably great, and I think I would
It's
really enjoy
outstanding.
it. But
and everything we talked about the story, the main story of Witcher 3, I think Witcher 1's story is better.
I can see that.
But, and I'm still saying right now, Witcher 3 is one of the few games, and I'm not going to say more than 10 games, I will use the word masterpiece to describe. But I think Witcher 3 Wild Hunt is a masterpiece.
It's always on our top 10 games list. It's my favorite game. It is my #1 favorite game.
It's at least in my 5. And
because
I've played a ton.
you have this love affair with Metroid that we don't even need to get into.
If I'm going to give you 5 right now, sure, Witcher 3 is one of them. But I'd probably say Super Metroid, Metal Gear Solid 1, Link to the Past.
Right.
Yeah, you know what? In fact, we were probably going to do another HITBOX just talking about like 25 because that was a good number.
Right, and I've been listening through the hitboxes again, and there are clear updates to your list.
There's a lot, yeah. Well, like we did our top favorite franchises, and I feel
I was
particularly
like, is it back
stupid.
here?
Dark Souls. Dark Souls would be that 5th one. Dark Souls is become so important, and I love that game so much, and I feel like I didn't get a chance.
Right, but like
to
with
play that
5,
one.
you're like, you can't even include Xenoblade 3, you can't include Metroid Dread.
I know, there's so much more I want to talk about. And then other little one-off things like the Frog from the Bell Tolls.
You
or,
love
or
that game
Ghost
with a
Trick.
passion.
There's amazing games out there, but we'll get a chance to talk about this later.
Frog from the Bell Tolls comes up so often, and you love that game with
It's
a
so
passion,
good.
and nobody knows this
No
game.
one knows what it... I know, nobody knows what that poor little game is. But the thing is, you know what Witcher 3 The Wild Hunt is. You couldn't possibly say that after the end of this enormous episode. And you can play it. It is on
changed my
everything.
life.
It is on every single modern console. And it plays well on all of them. And it's cheap.
I had to play it up here in your office when you were gone, and I stayed up here like 12 hours. I'd go
dominated
downstairs to
your
get
life.
food. At one point, I made sure I had blueberries in the house just so I had something healthier to snack on while I was playing this game that I could not put down. And, did not have a baby at the time. That makes all the difference.
So... You already know how I rated this in my playing with myself. I'm not changing this. Kim?
It's a 10 and a 10. I just said it was my favorite game.
I know. I'm just saying, just to at least formally ask you, what would you rate it in positive and critical, and why?
I'm rating it a critical because it's ruined all the other games for me. That has done so many things correctly. And it's done so many things well.
Or I don't know about just correctly, just so above and beyond that nothing else even compares.
Right, like everything else I've played after this, if I'm like, oh man, Witcher 3 did this better. That happens all the time.
Now, I would say that you haven't played, I would say Dark Souls is actually one of those games that they thought of everything, just like in Witcher.
I did start playing Dark Souls. I'm not like oblivious to Dark Souls. I'm not.
Yeah,
like,
well,
"What's Dark
as in
Souls?"
she dabbled enough to get to Firelink Shrine, and that was it. We just like played for an afternoon.
And then I've watched him probably play like like 10 hours.
I need to play more.
Stop playing it!
It's so good. But so is Witcher 3.
Oh, and then my positive side. Well, I love Geralt, and I'm going to say it. I love Geralt, and Geralt is sexy. So 10.
Okay. I don't understand. Oh, whatever. And you can make Geralt sleep with an untold number of women, and in this one, you don't collect them like Pokemon cards. That's a thumbs down. You wanted little like in Witcher 1, you want little Pokemon cards?
I am so not a feminist. I would have been like, yeah, that sounds great. Let's collect.
Gotta catch them all. Well, of course, I'm a completionist playing that game. Like, this feels awful, but
you can sleep with so many random women in Witcher 3. I think there was literally like a woman in Skellige who you just beat her in battle and she just
yes, and then she just sleeps with you.
And you never talk to her again.
The thing that drove me nuts was the only way that the game is like in Witcher 1, like checking a box, yes, you slept with this person, was you can go to like whorehouses, and it'll be, say when you have a dialogue option that you have already said to somebody, it'll turn gray instead of like orange. And that's like the only indicator that the game says like, yep, everybody. And I mean everybody. Galen has slept with everybody.
I understand why they took it out.
The Pokemon card, yes.
Sexist.
Oh, it totally was. It's definitely not going to be in Witcher the remake. They better not do that again. What? No! That was controversial then. No, they would get skinned alive if they did something like that now.
Who is making these cards? Is Geralt painting the woman
Good question. I never thought of that. Like, do they physically exist?
Does the woman just carry around these boudoir photos?
Or does he just have a painter friend who follows him around?
It's Dandelion.
It's Dandelion. Anyway, this episode was enormous.
I'm very tired.
Kim talked us into having longer form episodes and trying to have more structure so we actually cover everything in these. And I was intimidated by doing a round 2 of Witcher 3 for the longest time. Clearly, as I mentioned, we could do an entire podcast on this game.
Yeah.
And I still feel like we would be passing stuff up. Same for Dark Souls.
Like,
I could do the same on Dark Souls.
Topics and like the Crones.
Metal Gear Solid,
like,
I could do it as well. Metroid, I could do it.
Oh my gosh, that's like my Xeno thing too.
Xeno, I could do it as well.
Do that, but like The Witcher 3, we could have like an episode on the Crones, and then an episode on the Conjunction of Spheres, and then like an episode on the Nilfgaard army, or like Radovid.
Yeah, but because Hitbox is more of like a catch-all, I don't want to do. We want to jump around and change it up, like I do when playing with myself. Let's do a totally different console. Let's do a totally different series. I don't even do the same series more than once in one season. Okay. So I'm trying to jump around, so hopefully me packing in all of this Witcher 3 into one was acceptable enough for us to try and get this out of our system, because we haven't gotten to talk about this in a long time.
We have little Nindroids, too.
Yeah, we have the Nindroids. I have reviews for those, shameless plug. Yeah, you can go watch those.
They're great.
But anyway, good lord. Kim, did you get to say everything you wanted to say about Witcher 3?
No, because I wanted to talk about every single story element that I fell in love with.
At least you can now leave people listening to this podcast who have not played the game yet, and that will be something special for them.
I'm just going to have my own Witcher podcast where I get really close and talk very slow into the microphone and tell you about everything that happens in The Witcher 3.
And very, very nicely ask Doug Cockle to join us for it. If we were a bigger show, I would absolutely abandon Hitbox and jump right into The Witcher show featuring Doug Cockle.
I want to hear like his play, because he's one of those few this
actors
doesn't always
who
happen.
Really knows his character.
He really knows it. He plays the games. He likes the games.
He's been him for the longest time.
Yeah. So like,
this man is Geralt.
2007.
Yep. But anyway, thank you guys so much for tuning into this massive, oversized episode of Hitbox. If you enjoyed the show, you can help us keep it alive by supporting us on Patreon with the links in the show notes and this video's description. And for those of you on YouTube, remember to like the video and subscribe for more, and be sure to let us know what you thought of this show and what other topics you'd like to hear us cover in the future. And special thanks to all of our Patreon members. See ya!
Bye-bye.